Chapter 1368. In the air, Duguanai watched as Tsang Shanshue rushed towards him. Feeling the sharpness of Tsang Shanshue's sword, his lips curled up into a cruel smile. He even dared to kill his teacher. His senior brother was nothing in his eyes. Die! Duguanai's lips twitched. The illusionary 100 forms slashed across the sky. A ray of black light appeared and the murderous intent of the sword condensed into a giant black snake. It swallowed the sky and rushed towards Tsang Shanshue. Hum! Hiss! 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 The entire space shook and a muffled sound followed. The sword intent around Tsang Shanshue crumbled inch by inch. His silhouette paused in the air as he felt an enormous force pressing down on him from above, threatening to crush him into pieces. Ah! Tsang Shanshue could not resist this force. He howled in pain and his silhouette shook violently. He felt like his entire body was about to be torn apart. My good senior brother, goodbye. Seeing this scene, Duguanai let out a sinister laugh, his expression hideous and terrifying. However, before he could finish laughing, the space around him trembled strangely. Then, a ray of black light appeared and whistled downwards. It landed on Tsang Shanshue's body and formed a shield that enveloped him. In an instant, Tsang Shanshue felt the pressure around him lessen. His silhouette flashed and he descended. The sudden turn of events caused Duguanai's pupils to tremble. Then, he came to his senses. The corner of his mouth trembled as he called out a name, Nye Tian. In the next moment a silhouette appeared. At the same time, a giant sword shadow appeared and slammed into the giant black snake. Hum! A loud rumble resonated in the air. The sword shadow and the giant snake collapsed at the same time. An infinite amount of sword intent wreaked havoc in the air. The newcomer was none other than Nye Tian. His silhouette flashed and he arrived next to Tsang Shanshue. His face was dark and he said in a low voice, Headmaster Tsang, I am late. Master Nye Tian. When Tsang Shanshue saw Nye Tian again, all sorts of emotions welled up in his heart, hot tears gushed out of his eyes. He was the one who sent the signal to Nye Tian. However, not much time had passed. It was not easy for Nye Tian to arrive in such a short time. If Nye Tian had come a few seconds later, Tsang Shanshue would have died under Duguanai's sword, and would have been even more miserable than Elder Tian Huang. Hall Master Tsang, leave Duguanai to me. Nye Tian made sure that Tsang Shanshue's life was not in danger and signaled for him to step back. His silhouette moved and he stepped into the air, facing Duguanai. Nye Tian, long time no see. Duguanai saw Nye Tian's face clearly. Egi smiled, a teasing smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. A few months ago, he had witnessed Nye Tian's strength. At that time, he was indeed no match for Nye Tian. But now, he had condensed his godhead and advanced to the godly realm. He was no longer afraid of Nye Tian. Even if Nye Tian did not appear, he would have gone to the divine cold hall to look for Nye Tian. Duguanai, you even killed your own teacher, you're worse than an animal. Nye Tianling looked coldly at Duguanai and spoke in a low voice. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Nye Tian, save your breath. Duguanai smiled coldly. Killing Ren Tianhuang is only the beginning. After the Heaven Desolate Hall, it will be you, then Mo Qianjun and the others. All of you must die. Because I am the only one who can reach the peak of sword principle in the heaven realm. Is that so? Nye Tian's eyes darkened. He had already sensed that Duguanai's strength had advanced to the godly realm. Nye Tian, you are indeed strong, but it's a pity that your opponent is me, Duguanai. Duguanai smiled coldly. My name is Enai, and I will defy the heavens and Tao. Killing Ren Tianhuang is not only because of the hatred in the past, but also because, after killing him, I will no longer have anything to hold me back. To me, everyone in this world is nothing but grass, there is no meaning in their existence. Hearing Duguanai's words, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown, a faint chill ran down his spine. Duguanai was too ruthless, he killed without batting an eye. This kind of person was extremely terrifying when he gained strength. Thinking of this, Nye Tion's eyes darkened and suddenly became determined. He must kill Duguanai. Nye Tion, are you still my opponent now? Duguanai felt Nye Tion's murderous intent, but he smiled coldly and disdainfully. A few months ago, Duguanai was afraid of Nye Tion, but now, he did not put Nye Tion in his eyes at all. Whether I am your opponent or not, I will know after I try. Nye Tion's eyes turned cold, then the wings on his back fluttered, like a curtain that covered the sky, the whole heaven and earth shook violently. Nye Tion's figure was extremely fast, his whole body was filled with murderous intent, he was like a sword that could destroy the heaven and earth, directly blasting towards Duguanai. Your aura isn't weak, much stronger than Ren Wang, but that's all there is to it. Feeling Nye Tion's aura, the corner of Duguanai's mouth twitched. Following which, he unleashed his 100 forms of demonic void. Black sword chi blossomed in the air, condensing into a giant skull. It roared, as if it wanted to devour everything in its path. 100 transformations, just like its name, it could transform into different forms of sword chi. At the same time, it was accompanied by a terrifying 100 void chi that could weaken the opponent's strength. Nye Tion's expression flickered as he saw the gigantic skull charging at him. Duguanai's strength had exceeded his expectations. It was even more terrifying than the 1,000 flowing kills, or even Vincent. Just this sword chi alone was something that Nye Tion did not expect. But right now, Nye Tion's sword had already been unleashed, and could no longer be retracted. He could only brace himself and rush forward. Rumble! In the horizon, a thunderous rumble resounded. Nye Tion's sword chi descended and was actually swallowed by that strange skull. This sudden scene caused Nye Tion to frown. The wings on his back suddenly flapped and he hurriedly retreated. Trying to escape? Duguanai smiled coldly. He pointed his sword forward, and a sword chi pierced through the air, like an arrow leaving the bow, emitting an air-piercing sound as it flew towards Nye Tion. Nye Tion's eyes trembled. Although his speed was also fast, he was still a step too late. In a moment of desperation, astral energy gushed out from his body, activating the heavenly star guardian. Boom! A muffled sound rang out as the sword chi bombarded the astral shield, shattering it. Nye Tion's figure trembled as he was sent flying. Fortunately, the heavenly star guardian absorbed most of the impact. Nye Tion's martial body was not injured. The meteor wings flapped madly, stabilizing his body in the air. Nye Tion. Emo Rushi saw this scene from the side and couldn't help but exclaim. Cher, who was beside her, also frowned slightly. Her small face was twisted and she said in her heart, I clearly don't know who he is. Why do I feel inexplicable heartache when I see him injured? I'm fine. Nye Tion stabilized his figure and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He sneered and said in a deep voice, Duguanai, it seems that I underestimated you. After condensing the Godhead, even your sword spirit has changed, right? Chapter 1369. Suppressing the Sword Realm. Upon hearing Duguanai's words, Nye Tion's eyes trembled violently and his heart sank. It was no wonder that when he struck out with his sword just now, even though his sword intent was clearly weakened, it was as though his sword intent had been weakened in an instant. Duguanai possessed the 100 virtual body. After he ascended to the divine realm, the 100 forms of the demonic void sword underwent a mutation and perfectly fused with the 100 virtual chi. While suppressing the strength of a martial artist, it also suppressed the martial artist's sword realm. Nye Tion felt that just now, his sword realm had been suppressed by nearly an entire realm. It made him, a swordsman with the ultimate profound meaning of sword, only able to display the level of the elementary profound meaning of sword. This was the reason why he was defeated so miserably by that one sword strike. The 100 virtual body and the mutated 100 forms of the demonic void sword are really terrifying, thought Nyetian. Although the current Duguanai was only an early-stage low god, his true battle prowess was on par with a mid-stage or even a late-stage low god. Nyetian, do you still stand a chance against my mutated demonic void sword? Cold and disdainful smile appeared on Duguani's face. I'll say it again. Whether I stand a chance or not, I'll only know after I try, replied Nyetian with a flat smile. His eyes were as deep as water, without the slightest ripple. Arrogant! Duguanai creased his brows. What he couldn't stand the most was Nyetian's perpetually calm demeanor. He let out a low roar and launched the 100 forms of the demonic void sword. The terrifying 100 virtual chi perfectly fused with the demonic void sword, roaring like a river bursting its bank. In an instant, the heaven and earth trembled and the wind and clouds surged as though doomsday had arrived. The heaven and earth turned dark and let out a mournful wail. The space trembled incessantly as though it was about to collapse. Nyetian, this sword strike will take your life. Enjoy it. Amidst the rolling dark clouds, Duguani's cold voice rang out. In the void, a black sword shadow pressed over like a monster. The black sword light bloomed in the air, cold and murderous. At the sight of this, Nyetian spread open his hands, and then 2 black vortexes appeared on his palms. Violent energy of the stars surged within them, and terrifying black flames of nothingness surged on the outside. In front of the 100 virtual body, Nyetian's elemental meridians were suppressed. Using the supreme dragon vein was clearly not a wise choice. However, his 10th origin meridian was not suppressed, so he had to use the Starry Sky ancient martial art. This time, Nyetian was going to use the heaven and earth crafty Tao of the Starry Sky ancient martial art. Still want to resist? When Duguanai saw the strange vortex on Nyetian's palm, he smiled sinisterly and did not take it seriously in the slightest. As far as he was concerned, Nyetian was definitely going to die at this moment, and he absolutely didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Heaven and earth crafty Tao. Earth crafty reverse kill, heaven crafty absolute kill. Nyetian ignored Duguani's mockery and murmured softly. He felt the energy of the stars and the heart of nothingness condense, and then both of his palms struck out. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the 2 vortexes exploded and instantly condensed into 2 giant black snakes. They whizzed out like a hidden dragon breaking out of the abyss, extremely ferocious. When the heaven and earth twin snakes appeared, the void suddenly shook, and the space was like a river that was being washed away, splitting into 2 sides, as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. What a terrifying aura! Song Shanshua saw this scene from afar, and his expression was extremely shocked, and his face became dumbfounded. He originally thought that even if Nyetian appeared, he would not be able to defeat Duguanai, because Duguanai had become a celestial god, and Nyetian was still a heavenly emperor realm warrior. The difference between the two was like heaven and earth. But at this moment, the strength that Nyetian displayed was not the slightest bit weaker than Duguanai. In fact, his aura was even stronger. Mo Rushi and Cher watched from the side, their little faces tense, afraid that something would happen to Nyetian. Nyetian stood high in the sky, his eyes calm and murderous. He believed that the heaven and earth path combined with the power of the heart of nothingness would definitely give Duguanai a big surprise. At this time, Duguanai also noticed something, and his brows slightly furrowed. He said in surprise, "How is this possible? It's a power that can ignore the weakening of the 100 hollow chi." He did not expect that Nyetian's body could actually release a power that could not be weakened by the 100 hollow chi. So what? You are just a heavenly emperor realm warrior, I am a godly realm warrior, you are definitely not my opponent. Duguanai frowned and sneered. He believed that the power of the godly realm would definitely surpass the power of a heavenly emperor. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, above the void, the two giant snakes and the black sword shadow collided with each other. Two violent explosions sounded out, the space suddenly shook, and a space-time crack suddenly appeared in the center. Terrifying space-time storm surged out. Rumble! A terrifying sound came out, the black sword shadow and the two black snakes were directly crushed under the space-time storm. Kill! However, Nye Tian had already expected this scene. His eyes slightly sank, and then he flapped his wings, his figure flew straight up to the sky, and then he stabbed out with the sword in his hand. A black sword light whistled out, extremely sharp, and attacked Duguanai. Duguanai was a godly realm expert, and the heaven and earth path was also Nye Tian's strongest move at this time. This level of collision, the space-time of the heaven world's deity realm could not withstand. Nye Tian knew that this would be the result, so he prepared in advance. However, Duguanai was instantly stunned, and his reaction was a little slow. Huh! Duguanai suddenly raised his head, and when he saw the sword descending on his head, his eyes trembled slightly. This sword, Nye Tian used the Dark Star Ghost Kill, and combined with the power of the Heart of Nothingness. If it bombarded on Duguanai's body, it would definitely destroy his physical body, and even devour his godhead. The power of the Heart of Nothingness was definitely unimaginably terrifying. Nye Tian. Duguanai was stunned by the sudden sword, and then he roared in anger, but it was too late. At this moment, even if he wanted to attack, it was already impossible. Boom! The fatal sword fell, with the intent to kill, wanting to kill in one hit. However, at this moment, something strange happened. A black whirlpool was suddenly released from Duguanai's body, and in an instant, it expanded like a black hole, and opened its dark mouth. In the next moment, the black sword shadow fell, and was directly devoured by the black whirlpool, disappearing. In midair, Duguanai's figure stood upright, unscathed, and a cold smile hung on the corner of his mouth. Huh! The sudden scene made Nye Tian frown, and he was shocked on the spot. What kind of technique did Duguanai use to actually be able to block this sword attack? Right at this moment, Nye Tian suddenly saw that one of Duguanai's eyes had actually turned a deep black color. It was incomparably strange, as if it was a bottomless abyss, making people feel like they would be sucked in with just a glance. This is... Nye Tian suddenly understood something, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. His whole body trembled, and 4 words echoed in his mind: Devil's Knight's Eye. Chapter 1370. The Eye of the Devil's Knight. When these 4 words came out of Duguanai's mouth, Nye Tian's eyes suddenly trembled. He was not wrong. Duguanai actually had one of the 10 great pupils, the Eye of the Devil's Knight. The Eye of the Devil's Knight was ranked 8th on the other pupil list. It was ranked behind the 7th other pupil, the Rainbow Pupil, but before the 9th other pupil, the Scar of the Dusk, and the 10th other pupil, the Purple Demon Eye. Nye Tian never would have thought that Duguanai had hidden his strength so deeply. He was actually the owner of the Devil's Knight's Eye. It seemed that Duguanai had not revealed his true strength before. This was his true battle power. As for the Devil's Knight's Eye, Nye Tian had only heard of it, but he did not know its true power. From the Devil's Knight's Eye creating a black vortex that swallowed the fatal sword, it seemed to have a very strong swallowing ability. The 8th other pupil, Songshan Shui, was also stunned at this time. He screamed, his entire body petrified. He and Duguanai had known each other since they were young. They had known each other for hundreds of years, but he never knew that the latter actually had the Devil's Knight's Eye. Duguanai, not only was he fierce, but he was also very patient. Nye Tian, to be able to force me to this step, you are the first. At this time, Duguanai's eyes became cold. He stared at Nye Tian, suppressing a terrible anger in his heart. The Devil's Knight's Eye, this was his most hidden trump card. Now that it was forced out by Nye Tian, he was extremely unhappy. But, since you have seen my Devil's Knight's Eye, don't think of leaving here alive today. Duguanai smiled coldly. He then scanned the crowd and said in a cold voice, "Everyone here must die." The pupil of Devil's Night was regarded as Duguani's greatest secret, and he would never allow anyone else to know about it. "You want to kill me? Let's see if you have the ability." Nyetian exhaled deeply and calmed down. Just now, when Duguanai used the Devil's Knight's pupil to forcefully take on his attack, blood actually seeped out from the corner of his eye. It seemed that the Devil's Knight's pupil wasn't as terrifying as he had imagined. Perhaps it was because the heart of nothingness was too terrifying, and it placed too much of a burden on the eye of the Devil's Knight. "Die!" Duguanai bellowed and no longer had any scruples. A huge amount of 100 void chi gushed out of his body like raging waves, directly enveloping Nyetian. Nyetian frowned slightly. He flapped his wings and hurriedly retreated. At this moment, he had consumed too much of his star energy and was already somewhat unable to continue. Moreover, his Yuan meridians and Sword Dao realm were being suppressed, so the situation was extremely disadvantageous to him. Boom! Duguanai slashed out with his sword, and a black sword light blossomed in the air, turning into a sky full of sword shadows that bombarded Nyetian. Nyetian's speed was extremely fast, and at the same time, a sky-shrouding totem appeared behind him, condensing into a sky-shrouding enchantment, preventing the 100 void chi from invading his body. The weakening power of the 100 void chi was too strong. If it invaded his body, Nyetian's strength would drop by several small realms. Bang bang bang! Endless muffled sounds rang out, and the sky full of black sword shadows bombarded down like a sky full of crows, landing on the sky-shrouding totem, forcing Nyetian's figure to retreat again and again. He only had the power to defend, and had no power to fight back. Nyetian. Seeing this scene, Rushi's eyes flashed as she let out a cry of shock. After which, a pair of phoenix wings appeared behind her, transforming into a scarlet line of fire in the air. In the next instant, the silhouette of a phoenix appeared around her, and with a shrill cry, she directly rushed toward Duguanai. Rushi. Nyetian's figure stabilized, and suddenly saw Rushi making a move. Immediately, his face sank and he was extremely panicked. He repeatedly retreated just now because he was accumulating strength, preparing to fuse the crafty way of heaven and earth together to kill Duguanai in one blow. However, Rushi obviously made a wrong judgment of his situation, and in the future, Nyetian would be defeated, so she couldn't help but make a move. At this moment, Rushi already had the strength of a peak heavenly emperor, and she also had the body of a sage. Coupled with the inheritance of the ancient divine phoenix, her strength was faintly not weaker than an ordinary lower deity expert. However, the person she was facing was Duguanai, who was far stronger than an ordinary lower deity martial artist. "You're courting death." Just as Duguanai was about to continue attacking Nyetian, he suddenly saw a fire phoenix appear. The corner of his mouth twitched, and his eyes flickered with coldness. He directly stabbed out the 100 demonic forms, and a black sword shadow appeared like a giant mountain, pressing towards the fire phoenix. In the air, Rushi suddenly felt the strength in her body weaken. Her beautiful eyes trembled, and a look of panic appeared on her delicate face. However, it was already too late, and she no longer had the chance to retreat. No. Seeing this scene, Nyetian roared, and the void black flames on his body surged out like a volcanic eruption. He rushed over and slashed down with the sword Absolute Heaven Slash. Boom! In the void, a terrifying explosion sounded, and 3 powerful forces collided. Flames and sword will wreaked havoc in the air, and the whole world seemed to be on fire. Rushi felt the violent waves of air rushing over, and her eyes flashed. She could no longer withstand it, and her body was sent flying. At this moment, the terrible sword will was like maggots in the tarsal bone, pressing down on Rushi. At this critical moment, a figure desperately rushed over, and held Rushi in his arms. The wings on his back flapped, and he forcibly rushed out of the billowing waves of air. Nye Tian retreated a few kilometers away, and looking at the girl in his arms, his face was full of horror, and he shouted, "Rushi!" Emo Rushi's body trembled, and she woke up. Her face was pale, but her breath was very stable. Seeing Nye Tian's nervous look, her eyes flickered, and crystal-clear liquid surged in her eyes, and she said softly, "Nye Tian, I'm fine." Nye Tian took a deep breath, and after sensing that Emo Rushi was fine, his face finally relaxed a lot, and he said in a deep voice, "Don't risk your life for me next time." Emo Rushi was affected by the power of Dugunni's sword, and absorbed some 100 void chi, but she had the Nirvana Saint heart in her body, so it was not a big deal. On the other hand, Nye Tian's body was covered in blood, and he looked extremely terrifying. In order to save Emo Rushi, he completely disregarded everything and didn't care about his own life or death. Originally, he still had the confidence to kill Duguanai, but unfortunately, Emo Rushi's appearance made him consume a lot of star force, and the situation became even more troublesome. Emo Rushi's small face was a bit embarrassed, and she seemed to have become a hindrance to Nye Tian. "Nye Tian, do you still have the strength to fight?" At this time, Duguanai stepped forward, and his aura surged like a mountain and a sea, pressing down on him. Nye Tian's injuries were not light, and coupled with his strength and realm being suppressed, he was at an absolute disadvantage. Scram! However, almost at the same time, a cold voice suddenly sounded, and then a peerless figure appeared, directly breaking through Dugunni's aura. "Cher!" Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he saw the figure in front of him, and he shouted, "N." Dugunai looked at the beautiful woman in front of him, and his gloomy eyes couldn't help but freeze, but then he laughed strangely and said, "Nye Tian, the women around you are really more powerful than the other. I didn't expect this girl to be a deity realm martial artist too." Dugunai was very surprised. He didn't expect to actually encounter a deity realm martial artist. However, what he didn't know was that if there was no Cher, he couldn't advance to the deity realm at all. Chapter 1371. Cher's indifferent voice sounded from above the void. Her tone was very calm, but in the ears of Nye Tian and the others, it sounded incomparably domineering. It was as though in Cher's eyes, Duguanai wasn't a worthy opponent at all. He was just an ant that she could kill at will. Emo Rushi was stunned for a moment. She looked at Cher in astonishment and didn't know what to say for a moment. At this moment, Nye Tian took a step forward and said to Cher, "Cher, step back. Leave this person to me." He knew that Cher was an early-stage low god, but he didn't know what Cher's real battle strength was. Duguanai was an extremely formidable opponent. Even if Cher had the strength, she didn't have any battle experience. It was too dangerous to fight against Duguanai. Emo Rushi almost died in Dugunni's hands. Nye Tian didn't want the same thing to happen to Cher. "Your name is Nye Tian, right?" Cher's beautiful eyes flickered. She had a strange expression on her face and said, "Although I don't know who you are, I feel an inexplicable pain in my heart when you are injured. I think we are very good friends." Nye Tian was speechless. He didn't know what to say. Suddenly, Cher looked at Nye Tian with a faint smile and said, "Don't worry, he can't beat me." Nye Tian was stunned once again. Cher, after her bloodline awakening, was even more beautiful than before. She was so beautiful that she was out of this world. However, Nye Tian was puzzled. Why is Cher so confident? I only need one sword strike to defeat him. Cher smiled again before she looked at Dugunai and said in a cold voice, "Make your move." Dugunai was also taken aback by Shui-Er's words, but he finally reacted. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said sinisterly, "Little girl, you are the most arrogant person I've ever seen. Your strength is just an early-stage low god, the same as mine. I'd like to see how you are going to defeat me." Dugunni's entire body trembled. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger. How could he not be angry at being looked down upon by a little girl? Shwe slowly turned around, her cold eyes locked onto Duguanai. Her pretty face did not change at all, as if Duguanai was nothing special in her eyes. Arrogant little girl, you asked for it, Duguanai sneered. Duguanai sneered. With a move of his body, the demonic void 100 transformations was unleashed. A majestic sword chi howled like a raging river. In the void, a sword shadow pressed down on Shwe. Shwe, watch out! Mo Rushi screamed as her heart leapt into her throat. Nye Tian creased his brows. He too was ready to act at any moment. No matter what, he wouldn't let anything happen to Cher. Shwe stood in the air, not even sparing a glance at Duguanai. She looked completely at ease. When the gigantic sword silhouette was only 100 meters away from her, a crimson sword appeared in her hand. It was as red as fresh blood, dazzling to the eyes. I'll defeat you with one sword strike. The corner of Cher's mouth twitched as she murmured. The long sword in her hand stabbed out gently. Her movements seemed to be a little slow, but the next moment a strange scene took place. Endless crimson sword intent suddenly gushed out from the crimson sword. It was as if the setting sun had fallen and filled the sky. Several crimson sword shadows broke through the air like long snakes and drew a crimson trajectory in the sky. It was as if they were thousands of feet of red silk, extremely gorgeous. Chi chi chi. In the void, the crimson red silk swept out and actually entangled Duguanai's sword shadows, directly crushing them. Then, the crimson sword intent spread out like a torrential torrent. Duguanai was completely shocked by the sudden scene. His eyes trembled slightly, and his reaction was a little slow. At the moment of crisis, his eyes trembled slightly. Devil's Knight's pupil opened, and the Devil's Knight vortex appeared again, about to devour the crimson red silk. However, Cher's sword intent was extremely terrifying. It actually became more and more intense. The terrible power contained in the sword intent was suddenly released. Suddenly, the sky was filled with purple and red, like the clouds of fire under the setting sun, spreading uncontrollably. Boom! The next moment, the Devil's Knight vortex directly exploded. Duguanai's figure trembled, and he was sent flying backward. He howled miserably, "Ah, my eyes!" In the endless crimson, a bloody trajectory appeared, and Duguanai was directly knocked back thousands of meters away. His whole body was dripping with blood, and his flesh was badly mutilated. It was no longer possible to tell that he was human. On one side of his face, where his eyes were, became a huge bloody hole. One sword. Just one sword. Cher not only defeated Duguanai, but also destroyed his Devil's Knight's pupil. The sudden scene stunned everyone on the spot. The scene was dead silent, and the atmosphere was extremely strange. Nye Tian looked at Cher in a daze, unable to believe his eyes. Cher's strength was so terrifying. She defeated Duguanai with one sword, and even destroyed the latter's other pupil. This was too terrifying. Cher's words just now were not wrong. She defeated Duguanai with one sword. Mo Rushi's small face was also stiff. She did not expect that the usually gentle and pleasant Cher's body actually contained such a terrifying power. Cher was indeed overbearing, but she had the capital to be overbearing. Nye Tian's eyes trembled violently, and then he realized something and understood a lot. Logically speaking, Duguanai and Cher had the same realm, but he had the 100 virtual body, which could weaken the opponent's strength, so his chances of winning should be greater. Unfortunately, Cher's Yuan meridians were different from ordinary people. They were 3 lives meridians, and each meridian had 3 transformations. It was equivalent to having 27 Yuan meridians in her body, and each of them was stronger than ordinary Yuan meridians. However, this was not the most important thing. The most terrifying thing was that Cher's 3 lives meridians were not affected by the 100 virtual body. In other words, the 3 lives meridians could ignore the suppression of the 100 virtual body. This was the key to Cher's victory over Duguanai. The 3 lives meridians were indeed terrifying. It could actually resist the suppression of the 100 virtual body. One must know that even Nye Tion's supreme dragon meridians could not restrain the 100 virtual body. The 3 lives meridians were even stronger than the supreme dragon meridians. As for whether it was as strong as Nye Tion's 10th Yuan meridian, it was unknown. At the same time, Nye Tion also noticed that Cher's sword Dao realm was also not affected by the 100 virtual body. It seemed that her sword Dao realm had surpassed the profound meaning of the sword, and entered a whole new realm, a higher realm. The final key to Cher's victory over Duguanai was that her divine spark was far stronger than Duguani's. Although they were both early-stage low-god, Cher's divine spark was at least several times stronger than Duguani's. It was even stronger than a mid-stage or late-stage low-god. What was even more terrifying was the fact that the strength that Shui was currently displaying was under the suppression of the seal left behind by Jian Qingqi. Without the suppression of the seal, it was unknown just how abnormally powerful Shui would be. Gulp. Thinking of this, Nye Tion could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He said in his heart, "What a terrifying Cher." At the same time, in the space of Nye Tion's fiend god nascent embryo, Sakura could not help but frown. He muttered, "This girl's battle prowess is too terrifying. It's better not to make a move in the future. It would not be good if it attracted the attention of people with ulterior motive. After all, she is the legendary emperor of the underworld." Chapter 1372. Nye Tion didn't know what Sakura said. Although the latter wanted to know Cher's identity very much, Sakura kept it a secret and refused to say it. Sakura didn't seem to be happy about Cher revealing her strength. Instead, he was very worried, because he knew that once Cher's identity was suspected, what awaited Nye Tion would be a calamity that was even more dangerous than the secret of the fiend god nascent embryo being leaked. Sakura was now residing in Nye Tion's body. Even if he didn't care about Nye Tion's life or death, he still had to consider his own life. Although there was only a remnant soul left, Sakura still thought of being able to be reborn. This is impossible. In the void, Duguanai was like a madman. His whole face became distorted, incomparably hideous, and he screamed crazily. He never thought that there was such a terrible person hidden by Nye Tion's side. He had already discovered that Cher actually ignored his 100 virtual body, which was very strange. The 100 virtual chi contained in his 100 virtual body was a very terrible power that could weaken any martial artist. Why was it useless against Cher? Moreover, Cher's swordsmanship realm was even more strange. It was actually a brand new swordsmanship realm that completely suppressed his sword intent. Who was Cher in the end? Why was she so terrible? I said, "I only need one sword to defeat you." Cher's expression didn't change. There was no ripple at all. She said faintly, as if defeating Duguanai was an ordinary thing for her, nothing to be proud of. Nye Tion was stunned watching from the side. If he knew that Cher's strength was so terrible, he didn't need to risk his life to fight with Duguanai. "Little girl, what's your name?" Duguani's body shook, and the blood stains on his body were swept away. His complexion improved a lot, but that I had turned into a black hole, making him look even more ferocious. "You don't deserve to know," Cher replied indifferently. She then turned around and walked to Nye Tion's side. She had no intention of killing Duguanai. "You!" Duguani's face darkened, as if there were countless maggots biting his heart, making him feel suffocated. "Nye Tion, we'll meet again." After a while, Duguanai calmed down and glanced at Nye Tion. Then, his silhouette flickered as he flew up into the sky. In the sky, Duguanai directly broke through the void and disappeared. Nye Tion watched Duguanai leave with a complicated look in his eyes. He did not stop this person from leaving, mainly because he was worried about Emo Rushi and the others. Although Cher had defeated Duguanai, she had no intention of killing him. If he asked Cher to kill someone at this time, it would indeed be a bit difficult for her. Cher was originally a pure and innocent little girl. The battle with Duguanai should be the first battle in her life. Before, Cher did not have the slightest combat power, and she was just an ordinary girl. At this time, Cher walked over, but her face was a little pale, and she seemed to be very uncomfortable. Cher, are you okay? Emorushi saw that and stepped forward and asked worriedly. Nye Tian also frowned, worried that Cher would be in trouble, but he sensed Cher's body, and everything was normal. Cher's beautiful eyes flickered, and she said with a faint smile, "I'm fine, but that person's blood is too dirty, and it makes me a little disgusted." His blood is too dirty? Nye Tian was stunned, and his face was full of black lines. What kind of evaluation did Cher have for Duguanai? Nye Tian, your blood has too strong a murderous aura, and there is also an evil aura, but it doesn't make me feel disgusted. Cher looked at Nye Tian, and said with a serious face, then looked at Emorushi, and said with a smile, Sister Rushi's blood has the purest holy aura, and it is the best blood. Nye Tian was speechless, and he couldn't help but frown. Could it be that Cher could really smell something from the blood? But Nye Tian didn't care too much. This time, he was able to drive Duguanai away thanks to Cher. If it wasn't for her, he really didn't know how the battle would end. Lord Nye Tian. At this time, Song Shanshue's figure appeared. His face was pale, and it was obvious that he was heavily injured. At this time, Song Shanshue looked suspiciously at Cher, as if he didn't know her. He clearly remembered that when he was hiding in the Divine Cold Palace to protect Emorushi and Cher, Cher was just an ordinary person with no yuan qi at all. How did she become a godly state expert in the blink of an eye, and so powerful? This was too strange. Hall Master Tsang. Nye Tian looked at Song Shanshue, feeling very guilty. Although the matter with Elder Tian Huang was not Nye Tian's doing, it made Nye Tian feel a little guilty. Lord Nye Tian, this is the misfortune of my Heaven Wasteland Palace, Song Shanshue said bitterly. He knew that whether or not Nye Tian was here, Duguanai would not let the Heaven Wasteland Palace off. But today, the losses suffered by the Heaven Wasteland Palace were too heavy. Elder Tian Huang was dead, and more than half of the swordsmen of the Heaven Wasteland Palace were dead. In the future, the Heaven Wasteland Palace would no longer be the leader of the 9 great sword sects. Nye Tian let out a soft sigh and handed a divine pill to Song Shanshue, saying, "Take this pill, and your strength will recover very quickly, and you will even be able to improve further. I will let Cold Emperor and the others help you rebuild the Heaven Wasteland Palace. As for Duguanai, I promise you that I will kill him with my own hands." "Thank you, Lord Nye Tian." Song Shanshue bowed to express his gratitude. He knew that with his strength, he would never be able to take revenge on Duguanai in this lifetime, so he could only rely on Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded slightly, looked at the void, and said in his heart, "Duguanai must have gone to the God Domain. I wonder if he will join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace?" Duguanai had left the Heaven Domain, and would not return for the time being. Nye Tian remembered that he still had to return to the 3,000 small worlds with Ni jamming today, so he did not stay any longer and immediately bid farewell to Song Shanshue. The 3 of them blurred into action and flew towards the Divine Coldness Palace. "Nye Tian, that little girl is too strong and will easily attract attention. After reaching the domain, don't let her easily reveal her strength." On the way, Shi Tian's voice rang out, reminding Nye Tian. Nye Tian was taken aback at first, then he nodded. He was not a fool, of course. He knew that Shi Tian's warning was not as simple as it seemed. He did not let Cher make a move. It must be to prevent her identity from being seen through. "I should have let Elder Hai meet Cher. Maybe he also knows Cher's true identity." Nye Tian did not ask Shi Tian, because he knew that the latter would not say anything. He was a little regretful that he did not let Yi Qinghai meet Cher. Yi Qinghai's strength should be at the Supreme God level. Maybe he could see through Cher's identity. However, He was also not sure that Yi Qinghai would tell him Cher's identity. After half a day, Nye Tian and the others returned to the Divine Chill City. The three of them landed in the small courtyard, where Ni Jiaming and the others were already waiting for them. Nye Tian told Cold Empress about the Heaven Desolate Palace, and asked her to send people to help Tsang Shanxue rebuild the Heaven Desolate Palace. Then, Nye Tian did not waste any more time, and prepared to return to the 3,000 small worlds with Ni Jiaming. I wonder what will happen when Demon Sage Xian Long and Di Shi meet, Nye Tian thought to himself, looking at Ni Jiaming with a complicated expression. Chapter 1373. 3,000 Small Worlds, Tianluo City. Tianluo City was no longer the third-rate city it used to be. It had become the holy land of the 3,000 small worlds. Everyone in the 3,000 small worlds knew that the former city lord of Tianluo City, Nye Tian, had become an expert who stood at the peak of the heaven realm. In the central square of Tianluo City, there was a huge statue of a high-spirited young man. It was Nye Tian. At this moment, the wide streets of Tianluo City were filled with people. It was a bustling and lively scene. At this moment, two figures appeared in the void high above. The crowd below glanced at them but didn't care because Tianluo City was often visited by experts. However, the experts who appeared in the sky above Tianluo City were different from the past. They were two young men. Although they had restrained their aura, it was still difficult to conceal the powerful aura around them. These two people were none other than Nye Tian and Ni Jiaming. Nye Tian stood in the sky and looked at the huge statue in the city from afar. He suddenly realized that the statue looked very similar to him. He couldn't help but be stunned. Then he understood and couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that he had become an existence like the 3,000 small world. Looking at Tianluo City below him, Nye Tian suddenly thought of everything in the past. The young man who brought Nye Yuro and the others to Tianluo City for the first time. He held the Dragon Blood Martial Gathering under great pressure and finally stepped into Sumi's spiritual capital with his own strength. Thinking of all this, Nye Tian was slightly moved. Although these things only happened a few years ago, it made him feel as if it was a lifetime ago. Ni Jiaming looked at Nye Tian and was not in a hurry. "Let's go out of the city." After a while, Nye Tian became cold and said with a faint smile. The two figures moved and arrived in the sky above Tianluo Mountain in the blink of an eye. Just when the two figures appeared, Tianluo Mountain suddenly trembled. Then, a majestic dragon aura was released and gradually condensed into a dragon-shaped shadow. It was the dragon soul Di Shi. Nye Tian. Di Shi's figure moved and soared into the sky. A loud dragon roar resounded in the space. "Big brother Di Shi." Nye Tian was also very excited. He stepped into the air and stepped on Di Shi's back. Di Shi's enormous dragon silhouette soared into the sky, sweeping up the scattered clouds in all directions with a majestic aura. He said loudly, "Nye Tian, your strength has actually reached the peak of Sky Emperor. It seems like you've experienced a lot during this period of time." It had only been a few years since Nye Tian left Heaven Luo City. To Di Shi, such a short period of time was like the blink of an eye. Nye Tian's strength had risen so quickly that Di Shi was very surprised. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "Brother Di Shi, your dragon chi has also recovered a little. It's useless even if the dragon energy recovers." Di Shi's voice was mighty as he said, "If I can't recover my physical body, I will only be a dragon soul in the end. I will never be able to return to my peak. Big brother Di Shi, I brought someone who can restore your dragon body." Nye Tian smiled and said directly, However, at this moment Di Shi was surprised. Then he noticed the existence of Ni Jiaming. His dragon eyes that were like the sun and the moon suddenly darkened, and then he roared into the sky, "Dragon Rebel Chi, this guy is from the Dragon Rebel clan." In an instant, Di Shi realized that Ni Jiaming was from the Dragon Rebel clan. he suddenly became furious and roared into the sky. His enormous body directly rushed towards Ni Jianming. "Brother Di Shi, wait!" Nie Tian knew that Di Shi was hot-tempered, so he screamed and wanted to stop him. "Mr. Nie Tian, let him do it." Ni Jianming's face was solemn. He stood quietly in the sky and did not intend to resist. Boom! Di Shi's enormous figure rushed over, and a loud sound was heard in the sky. However, it did not cause any damage to Ni Jianming. Di Shi was just a dragon soul, not a physical body, while Ni Jianming was already a god-state warrior. The gap between the two was too big. Even if Ni Jianming stood still, Di Shi could not hurt him. However, Di Shi did not give up and continued to charge forward. In the void, the raging dragon Qi kept raging, as if it was going to fall and tear the void apart. Nie Tian looked helpless and could only look at Di Shi to vent his anger. However, at this time, he immediately found that as Di Shi kept attacking, his strength was getting stronger and stronger. Even the dragon's shadow was getting closer to the real thing. Noticing this, Nie Tian could not help but stare, and a strange look appeared on his face. He immediately activated the holographic divine sigil. The invisible divine sigil shrouded over, and a holographic projection appeared in his mind. Nie Tian looked at the holographic projection and immediately understood what was going on. He could not help but be stunned. Ni Jianming's body slowly released the dragon Qi, and it automatically transformed into Di Shi's dragon Qi. While Di Shi's strength was increasing, Ni Jianming's strength was gradually weakening. Could this be the method that Ni Jianming used to restore Brother Di Shi's physical body? Nie Tian murmured with a shocked look. He did not know what method Ni Jianming had used to transform the dragon Qi into dragon Qi. However, Ni Jianming had obviously sacrificed his strength to restore Di Shi's strength. At this time, people in Tianluo City and the nearby cities were watching the scene in the sky. They stared blankly, and their eyes became dull. After a while, Di Shi's strength had reached the peak of Celestial Emperor, while Ni Jianming's strength had dropped from the peak of Intermediate Deity to the late stage of Intermediate Deity. "Bastard! Why didn't you fight back?" Di Shi roared. He seemed to be a little tired. His huge body floated in the air, and then he found the change in his strength. He could not help but be stunned. He shouted, "Boy from the Dragon Rebel clan, do you think that I will forgive you if you restore my strength? The Dragon Rebel clan is the mortal enemy of the Dragon clan. Even if you die in front of me, I will still crush your bones and scatter your ashes." Di Shi's hatred for the Dragon Rebel clan was higher than the sky and deeper than the sea. Even if Ni Jianming stood still and let him hit him, and even sacrificed his strength to restore his strength, his hatred still could not be reduced. "Brother Di Shi." Nie Tian moved and came to Di Shi. He said, "He is indeed a member of the Dragon Rebel clan, but he has a way to restore your physical body." "I don't need it." Di Shi roared angrily. "The Dragon Rebel clan is the mortal enemy of the Dragon clan. Even if I want to restore my physical body, I don't need the help of the Dragon Rebel clan." In Di Shi's mind, the Dragon clan was the most elegant and noble race in the world. It was a great humiliation for him to let his enemy restore his physical body. Nie Tian frowned slightly. He did not expect Di Shi to be so stubborn in addition to his hot temper. Ni Jianming stood where he was with a calm face. He had expected this situation, so he was not surprised by Di Shi's reaction. "Lord Di Shi, I know that no matter what I do, I can't eliminate your hatred. I also know that you will not let me restore your physical body." Suddenly, Ni Jianming looked up at Di Shi and said with burning eyes, "You can ignore your physical body, but can you ignore the dragon spring vein?" Chapter 1374. In the sky above Tianluo City, Di Shi suddenly heard Ni Jianming mention the dragon's spring vein. After being stunned for a moment, he calmed down and said in a deep voice, "Brat, how do you know about the dragon's spring vein?" The dragon's spring meridian was a sacred treasure of the dragon kind. She didn't care whether his physical body could recover or not, but he had to find the dragon's spring meridian. I have a way to help you find the dragon's spring vein. And Jianming did not say too much. Shi's pupils constricted slightly. He asked in surprise, "Why should I believe you?" And Jianming's expression was calm. He looked at Nie Tian and said, "You don't need to believe me. You only need to believe him." Nie Tian narrowed his eyes slightly as he did not expect Jianming to say that. It seemed that after Jianming regained his memories, he was no longer as naive as before and knew how to play trick. At this time, Shi looked at Nie Tian, obviously asking the latter if Jianming was a trustworthy person. Yes. After thinking for a while, Nie Tian nodded solemnly. For now, Jianming was a trustworthy person. Shi calmed down, pondered for a long while, then looked at Jianming and asked, "Can you really find the dragon's spring vein?" Xianlong Demon Saint, you should have heard of this name, right? Jianming's eyes lit up and he suddenly said, "The sacred lord of the dragon rebel clan." Shi moved slightly and was a little surprised. Then, he realized something and exclaimed, "You're Demon Saint Xianlong." "That's right." Jianming did not deny it and said calmly, "You should believe me now." Shi was a little shocked. He didn't expect the young man in front of him to be Demon Saint Xianlong, the demon who destroyed the dragon clan. It was no wonder that Shi sensed an unusually powerful dragon chi from Jianming. "Alright. This dragon believes you." After a moment, Shi finally nodded his head, but his eyes were still filled with anger. Jianming nodded slightly and said, "Then let's leave this place." Shi narrowed his eyes and said, "I'm just a dragon soul, I can't leave Tianluo Mountain." Jianming laughed and said, "I couldn't in the past, but I can now. I let you recover your strength to peak Heavenly Emperor in order to leave this place." Nie Tian frowned and suddenly came to a realization. It turned out that Jianming had sacrificed his strength to bring Shi away, not to help him recover his physical body. It seemed like Jianming had already planned everything. Nie Tian and the other two did not waste any more time and immediately prepared to leave Tianluo City. Before leaving this place, Nie Tian found the current Tianluo City Lord, Gao Han, who was also the former Tianluo City Guard commander, and left him some spirit pills and martial arts manuals. After leaving Heaven Luo City this time, he didn't know if he would ever return. Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the three of them tore through the void and left. It was only at this moment that the people of Heaven Luo City realized that the young city lord of the past had grown into an existence that they could not understand. Half a day later, Nie Tian's group arrived at the Shumi world, the entrance to the forbidden land of wind and cloud. "You want to restore Big Brother Shi's body in the forbidden land of wind?" Nie Tian stared at the forbidden land of wind and couldn't help but be stunned. Back then, he had entered the forbidden land of wind and cloud. That was how he had met Jianming and his brother and learned about the existence of the Dragon Rebel clan and the secret behind the destruction of the Dragon clan. Yes. Jianming nodded and said, "Lord Shi is the most powerful golden dragon in the Dragon clan. It won't be easy to restore his body. It will take some time." The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly. It seemed that he had underestimated the situation. Then, the three of them entered the forbidden land of wind and went directly to the Dragon Rebel Valley. "Is this the Dragon Rebel ancestral ground?" Shi looked at the valley in front of him, his eyes trembling slightly. The Divine Dragon clan had been completely destroyed, but the enemies of the Divine Dragon clan were hiding in the Dragon Rebel ancestral ground, lingering on. This made him even angrier. "Yes." Jianming nodded and said to Shi, "Lord Shi, please wait here. Sacred Lord is back." At this moment, all the people of the Dragon Rebel clan showed up and greeted Jianming. When the people of the Dragon Rebel clan saw Shi, they were all shocked and looked up at him. More than 600,000 years had passed. The people of the Dragon Rebel clan were no different from ordinary human beings now. Only the chieftain and the elders knew about the past of the Dragon Rebel clan. Most of the people of the Dragon Rebel clan had never seen the Dragon clan before. They were all prostrating on the ground in worship. Dishi moved and soared into the sky. He didn't want to see the people of the Dragon Rebel clan. Nye Tian and Enai Jiaming looked at each other and smiled. Then they walked into the Dragon Rebel hall. After a while, the chieftain of the Dragon Rebel clan, Enai Nan, the chief elder, Enai Chiefeng, and the other elders all showed up. Sacred Lord. Although Enai Nan was Enai Jiaming's father, he was very respectful to the latter. When Enai Chiefeng and the others saw Nye Tian, their expressions became complicated. They already knew that Nye Tian wasn't the destined one in the heavenly secret prophecy. However, Nye Tian was related to both the Dragon Clan and the Dragon Rebel Clan. He must have come to the Dragon Rebel Valley for something. Lord Nye Tian, long time no see. Enai Chiefeng took a step forward and said calmly. He was shocked. He sensed that Nye Tian's strength had reached the peak of the Heaven Emperor realm. However, the next moment Enai Chiefeng was even more shocked. He suddenly realized that Enai Jiaming's strength had advanced to the God realm. Sacred Lord, you. Enai Chiefeng was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Yes. Enai Jiaming nodded and said, some of my memories have been awakened. Immediately, Enai Jiaming briefly explained everything that had happened. Enai Chiefeng and the others were dumbfounded. However, Enai Jiaming's memories had been awakened, his strength had been restored, and the vanishing shadow restriction in his body had been suppressed. This was absolutely great news for the Dragon Rebel clan. Sacred Lord, there's a dragon's soul outside. He's here. Enai Chiefeng calmed down a lot and said seriously. Chief Elder, since my memories have been awakened, there are some things I have to do. Enai Jiaming let out a long sigh and told them about Dishi. In the end, he said, I will help Lord Dishi recover his dragon body and then look for the Guardian family with him. The Guardian clan. When Enai Chiefeng and the others heard Enai Jiaming mention this organization, they were stunned on the spot. The Guardian family, Enai Chiefeng and the others all knew about this organization, but they had only read about it in ancient books. They had never seen it in person. Therefore, they even doubted whether this organization really existed. Now that Enai Jiaming mentioned the Guardian family, it proved that this secret organization did exist. Holy Lord, you want to help Lord Dishi recover his dragon body. Could it be that you want to use? At this moment, Enai Chiefeng suddenly thought of something, and his expression changed. He took a step forward, but didn't dare to finish his sentence. The other elders also thought of something, and their expressions changed at the same time. Seeing the reaction of Enai Chiefeng and the others, Nye Tian couldn't help but frown. He didn't know how Enai Jiaming was going to help Dishi recover his dragon body. He actually made Enai Chiefeng and the others so frightened. Chapter 1375. Qilin's Precious Blood. Up in the Dragon Rebel Hall, Nye Tian was stunned when he heard the name. He finally understood why Enai Chiefeng and the others were so frightened. It turned out that Enai Jiaming was going to use Qilin's precious blood to restore Dishi's dragon body. Qilin's precious blood was the Dragon Rebel clan's sacred treasure. Normally, Qilin's precious blood would only be used by the most outstanding members of the Dragon Rebel clan. Outsiders couldn't use it. When Nye Tian and the others had been badly injured, Enai Jiaming had insisted on using Qilin's precious blood. Now, Enai Jiaming was going to use Qilin's precious blood on the Dragon Rebel clan's mortal enemy. How could Enai Chiefeng and the others accept it? However, Nye Tian wasn't right. Enai Chiefeng was so frightened not only because of Enai Jiaming's decision, but also because once Dishi used Qilin's precious blood, it would probably be destroyed. Even if it could be preserved, it would take a long time to recover. The vitality of Qilin's precious blood contained rich dragon qi, while Dishi's body contained the purest dragon qi. The clash of the two extreme powers would cause great harm to Qilin's precious blood. Back then, Nye Tian had a bit of dragon chi in his body, but he had almost died together with Qilin's precious blood. Sacred Lord, this. And I Chifeng and the others came to themselves in shock. They wanted to say something, but Enai Jiaming interrupted them. I've made up my mind. Enai Jiaming said calmly, this is a chance for the Dragon Rebel clan to atone for the mistakes we've made in the past. It's also a chance for us to rise again. If the Dragon Rebel clan can be revived, we can work with them to destroy the Jueying Temple. Only then can the Jueying inhibition in the Dragon Rebel clan be completely removed. Enai Chifeng and the others were stunned. They all knew that Enai Jiaming wasn't that gentle young man anymore. He had become the real Sacred Lord Xian Long Enai Nan, Enai Chifeng, and the others knew that nothing they said would change anything. They could only nod and support Enai Jiaming's decision. Sacred Lord, when are you going to take Lord Di Shi into the Dragon Rebel Forbidden Ground? Enai Chifeng heaved a long sigh. He seemed to have aged a lot. Everyone understood that if Enai Jiaming helped Di Shi recover his dragon body and Di Shi's strength recovered, it would be the end for the Dragon Rebel clan if he suddenly went crazy. Right away. Enai Jiaming nodded slightly, then looked at Nye Tian and said, but before that, I have something to say to Mr. Nye Tian. Enai Chifeng and the others nodded respectfully and left the hall, leaving only Nye Tian and Enai Jiaming. Enai Jiaming, if you have anything to say, just say it. Nye Tian looked at Enai Jiaming, not knowing what the latter would say. Mr. Nye Tian, it will take some time to restore Lord Di Shi's physical body, at least half a year, at most a year. I don't think you have time to stay in the Dragon Rebel Valley, right? Enai Jiaming said calmly as he sized up Nye Tian with a strange gaze. The heart of nothingness in your body can't be suppressed any longer. You don't have much time left. Right now, even if your Godfiend essence embryo awakens, you won't be able to use the heart of nothingness. Only by fusing with the boundaries of the universe can you survive. The faint voice fell into Nye Tian's ears, but it made him frown. It turned out that Enai Jiaming had already seen through everything. Not only did he know about the danger of the heart of nothingness, but he also knew about the Godfiend essence embryo. In fact, it wasn't strange at all. Enai Jiaming was a man who had lived for more than 600,000 years. Even the old monsters in those territories didn't have such a lifespan. What do you want to say? Nye Tian looked at Enai Jiaming, his eyes flickering slightly. Enai Jiaming was no longer as simple as he used to be. Instead, he had become very complicated. He obviously didn't want to show off to Nye Tian by saying so much to him. He had another purpose. Mr. Nye Tian, when I traveled between territories in my early years, I heard about the boundaries of the universe. Enai Jiaming smiled, a strange look flashing in his eyes. Really? Nye Tian was stunned. He was worried about where the boundaries of the universe were. Yes. Enai Jiaming nodded slightly. All of a sudden, he took out a token and gave it to Nye Tian. He said, this is the Dragon Rebel Sacred Token. Take it. Go to the territories and find a man called Ming Mo. He's the Dragon Emperor of the demonic Dragon Clan. I didn't kill him back then, so he should still be alive. If he sees the Dragon Rebel Sacred Token, he'll tell you where the boundaries of the universe are. Ming Mo, Nye Tian took the Dragon Rebel Sacred Token, but he frowned slightly. The territories were so vast. Where could he find such a man? He knew nothing about territories. Finding a man in such a vast territory was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Besides, since Ming Mo knew Enai Jiaming, he must have been a man from more than 600,000 years ago. He didn't even know if he was still alive. But this was a clue. It was better than nothing. That's all I can do for you. Enai Jiaming smiled and said, whether you can find Ming Mo or not depends on your luck. Yes. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said with a smile, is there anything else you want to tell me? Enai Jiaming frowned. He thought for a while, but his face looked serious. He said, "There's something you might want to know, but it doesn't have much to do with you." "What is it?" Nye Tian was taken aback. "It's about the heavenly secret prophecy." And I Jiaming narrowed his eyes and said, "The destined one in the heavenly secret prophecy isn't a person, but an organization." "An organization?" Nye Tian's pupils shrank slightly. He was dumbfounded. He thought the destined one was Lin Yi. Once Lin Yi died, the heavenly secret prophecy would be broken. He didn't expect there to be more than one destined one, but an organization. Are there other people with natural dragon bloodlines besides Lin Yi? Nye Tian asked in a deep voice after calming down a little. Yes. And I Jiaming smiled bitterly and said, according to the heavenly secret prophecy, this is the fate of the dragon rebel clan. The reincarnated blood demon king is just the beginning. There will be more destined ones in the future. Before these destined ones show up, I must find the guardian family. Perhaps this is also my destiny. Nye Tian frowned and his eyes were a little gloomy. He had never believed in fate, so he had always scoffed at what others said about fate. Fate was the foundation of human survival. It could only be controlled by oneself. How could one believe in fate? And I Jiaming had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, but he didn't even know this. He had lived in vain. Perhaps it was because he had lived for so long and experienced so much that I Jiaming believed in fate more. Mr. Nye Tian, after I help Lord Di Shi restore his dragon body, I will go to find the guardian family with him. And I Jiaming stopped talking about the destined one and turned to Nye Tian. Okay. Nye Tian nodded slightly. He found that I Jiaming seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. He couldn't help but ask, "Is there anything else you want to tell me?" And I Jiaming frowned and looked serious. After thinking for a long time, he finally said, "About the girl named Cher, I have something to remind you." "Cher?" Nye Tian was stunned. Then his eyes trembled and he said excitedly, "You know the real identity of Cher?" Chapter 1376. Do you really know Cher's identity? Above the Dragon Rebel Palace, Nye Tian stared at I Jiaming with burning eyes, with uncontrollable passion. He really wanted to know Cher's identity, but Elder Jian and Indra kept it a secret, which made him even more curious. I Jiaming lived longer than Elder Jian and Indra, so it was not strange that he knew Cher's identity. "I do know Miss Cher's identity." I Jiaming nodded slightly, but his expression was very serious. He said, "But I can't say too much about her. If you really want to know, I'll tell you a name. You'll find the answer you want to know by following this name." "A name?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he couldn't hide the disappointment on his face. But a name was not bad, and it was better than Elder Jian and Indra not saying anything. Emperor of the Underworld. I Jiaming's eyes flickered, and he squeezed the two words out of his teeth. He said, "If you have the chance to enter the territory, you can look for clues about Emperor of the Underworld yourself. But this name should be taboo, so don't mention it to others." Okay. Nye Tian nodded slightly. It was better to know some clues than nothing. He still couldn't figure out what was behind Cher that even I Jiaming was so cautious. All of a sudden I Jiaming asked, "Mr. Nye Tian, is there a strange serpent with dragon horns beside Miss Cher?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said in surprise, "How do you know? When Cher was in the abyss of chaos, there was indeed a big snake by her side, named Shai. Then there's no mistake." I Jiaming nodded heavily and his eyes narrowed. He said, "That big snake is the divine beast that accompanied Miss Cher, and it concerns Miss Cher's life and death. Before the big snake grows up, it can't leave its birthplace." Nye Tian was stunned again. He didn't expect I Jiaming to know so much. No wonder when he brought Cher out of the Forest of Destiny, Shyness was unwilling to leave. So it was because it couldn't leave. "That's all I can say about Miss Cher. Enai Jiaming looked at Nye Tian with a solemn expression, but said in his heart, "The divine beast beside Cher is not a serpent at all, but the legendary ancestral dragon." Nye Tian did not know what Enai Jiaming was thinking and could only nod slightly. "Mr. Nye Tian, Miss Cher's identity is special. She is related to the survival of a realm." Enai Jiaming's expression softened. "Once we enter the realmverse, don't let her see any paramount gods, and don't let her see an astrologer. Don't let her show her strength in front of others. If her identity is leaked, it will definitely be a disaster for you." "All right, I got it." Nye Tian nodded solemnly with a solemn expression. Enai Jiaming's words were exactly the same as Di Tian's. Both of them had the same evaluation of Cher. It seemed that Cher's identity must be extraordinary. But Nye Tian couldn't figure it out. She was just a little girl. No matter how powerful she was, how could she be related to the survival of a realm? Was Enai Jiaming making a fuss over nothing? But he would take Enai Jiaming's warning to heart, and would not let Cher fight casually again. With Cher's age and strength, if she fought, she would attract too much attention. "All right, that's all I want to say. I'm going to take Lord Di Shi into the Dragon Rebel Forbidden Area. You go and tell him." Enai Jiaming smiled faintly and said to Nye Tian. Nye Tian nodded and said yes. He leaped out of the Dragon Rebel Palace and went to the sky. "Nye Tian, what did Demon Saint Xianlong say to you?" Di Shi appeared and asked in a deep voice. Nye Tian didn't hide anything. He told Di Shi what Enai Jiaming said and said in the end, "Brother Di Shi, Enai Jiaming will need about half a year to help you recover your body. After that, he will go with you to find the dragon's spring vein. During this time, I can't stay here with you. I have a lot of things to deal with." "Don't worry." Di Shi's huge dragon head shook. He knew what Nye Tian was worried about. He said, "After I recover my body, I won't fight against the dragon rebel tribe. If Demon Saint Xianlong can help me find the dragon's spring vein and revive the dragon tribe, I'll reconsider everything." "Okay," Nye Tian nodded heavily, then laughed and said, "Brother Di Shi, let's part ways here. When I'm done with my business, I'll come here to find you. I hope you're still here then." "Okay." Di Shi shook his head and looked at Nye Tian with burning eyes. The two had just met for half a day and then they had to part again. After this, they didn't know when they would meet again. Nye Tian smiled faintly and didn't stay any longer. He moved and left. After watching Nye Tian leave, Di Shi slowly turned his huge body around. Enai Jiaming had appeared behind him at some point. "Lord Di Shi, please." Enai Jiaming smiled and nodded. Di Shi didn't say anything. He followed Enai Jiaming to the Dragon Rebel Forbidden Land. A long time after the two of them left, Nye Tian's figure appeared again. It turned out that Nye Tian was still worried about Enai Jiaming, so he planned to leave after a few days. Then, Nye Tian hid in the Dragon Rebel Valley for 2 days. After confirming that there was nothing unusual, he finally left. He could only leave the dragon's spring vein to Enai Jiaming and Di Shi for the time being. He hoped they could cooperate well. After leaving the Wind Cloud Forbidden Land, Nye Tian returned to the Divine Realm. Half a day later, he appeared in the Divine Cold Palace. Nye Tian went to his small courtyard. Emo Rushi and Cher happened to be there. Nye Tian. Emo Rushi was very happy to see Nye Tian back. Cher also smiled faintly. Clearly, she was much friendlier to Nye Tian. Nye Tian smiled faintly and told them what happened in the past few days. Then, he prepared to go to the Divine Realm. "Lord." At this time, Nye Chio appeared. He was very happy to see Nye Tian and said, "Lord Emo Qianjun and Master Jiuqian Sheng are here. They're in the Divine Cold Palace now." "Okay." Nye Tian nodded. He told Emo Rushi and went to the Divine Cold Palace. Before he went to the 3,000 small worlds, he asked Nye Chio to find Emo Qianjun and Jiuqian Sheng. He was going to go with them. A day later, Nye Tian and the others appeared in the square outside the Divine Cold Palace. Today they would leave the Divine Realm and go to the Divine Realm. A total of 5 people were going with Nie Tian, Mo Rushi, Sher, Niechio, Mo Qianjun, and Jiu Qianxing. As for the others, Han Fei, Zhang Jianqing, and the others, Nie Tian left several spacetime array scrolls. When their strength increased, they would go to the Divine Realm on their own. On the square, Nie Tian opened the spacetime array scroll. A powerful spacetime aura was released and a spacetime array was formed. Nie Tian did not hesitate and was the first to step into the array. Mo Rushi and the others followed suit. With a thought, Nie Tian activated the spacetime array. A surge of spacetime aura appeared in the array. Chapter 1377. Shocking God Domain, Scarlet Moonland, in a Valley. Boom! Suddenly, the void shook and a spacetime aura appeared. Several figures descended from the sky. It was Nie Tian and the others. Nie Tian took a step forward and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His pale complexion immediately improved. The spacetime pressure in crossing territories was very strong. Even with Nie Tian's strength, he still felt a little tired. Everyone reacted immediately and started to observe the surrounding environment. Everything here was not much different from the plane world. The spacetime was very stable, and the heaven and earth spiritual power was more abundant. Among the heaven and earth spiritual power, there was a mysterious power, the spirit force. The trees here were taller than in the heaven domain. Even the short shrubs were dozens of meters high. In such an environment, the warriors looked even smaller. Is this the upper territory? Jiu Qianxing was the first to speak. He seemed very excited as he looked around. The upper territory, the God domain, these were the things that the warriors in the heaven domain dreamed of. Jiu Qianxing was very excited now that he was in the territory. Nie Tian nodded slightly. With a flip of his hand, a map scroll appeared in his palm, and he unfurled it. This was the map he found in Zhao Zi's spatial ring. It was the map of the entire shocking God domain. The map scroll was opened, and several streams of light surged into it. As the light flickered, the characters gradually became clear. Nie Tian sensed the aura on the map and immediately understood. He pointed at a mountain range and said, "We are in the Brilliant Sky mountain range. This is the territory of the Red Moon Divine Palace." The information on the map was very clear. The entire shocking God domain was divided into 13 regions. 12 of them were the divine palaces. The core region in the center was not shown. There was no information about it. Nie Tian glanced at the unknown region and did not pay much attention to it. Red Moon Divine Palace. With a thought, a spot of light lit up on the map. It was the location of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. What a magical map! Niechio looked at the changes on the map and could not help but exclaim. Sure enough, the things created by the people of the realms were much more brilliant than those of the Heaven Realm's God Realm. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said, "The Brilliant Sky mountain range we are currently at is located at the intersection of many divine palaces. It is 3,000 miles away from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Judging from the stability of the realm's spacetime, it would take at least a few days to reach the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. The spacetime pressure in realms was heavier, and the spacetime stability was also higher. Therefore, the speed of martial practitioners would be affected here. If it was in the Heaven Realm's divine domain, Nie Tian could fly 3,000 miles in a day. On the other hand, it would take him about 3 days to travel 3,000 kilometers in the realms. Nie Tian, are you going to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace now?" At this time, Mo Qianjun, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. "Shui Wushuang and Qian Lu Sha are both at the Red Moon Divine Palace. If you go there now, they won't let you go. Brother Mo, don't worry. I heard from Lord Zhao that the shocking God realm will hold the grand competition of the 12 divine palaces in 3 months. This is a matter of life and death for the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Even if Shui Wushuang wants to kill me, it will be after the competition." Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was not worried about Shui Wushuang's revenge. The reason why Nie Tian was in a hurry to go to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace was because he wanted to see the Red Moon Empress and inquire about the glorious demon or the cosmos boundary. The heart of nothingness was almost out of control. Nie Tian had to find the cosmos boundary as soon as possible. This was the most important matter at the moment. Brother Mo, Brother Jiu, both of you come with me to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. With your talent, you should be able to condense your godhead and advance to the God realm very quickly. Nie Tian said with a faint smile. He could sense that Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qianxing's strength had also improved greatly. Obviously, they had absorbed some spirit sword intent when Cher awakened. All right. Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qianxing nodded in agreement. They knew nothing about the realmverse. Entering the Crimson Moon Divine Palace with Nie Tian was the best choice. After the discussion, they did not delay any further and prepared to go to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly sensed something. His eyes narrowed slightly and he shouted, "Be careful! Rumble! Rumble! Rumble!" Before he could finish his sentence, a violent sound came from the ground. The ground was directly lifted up, and more than a dozen huge black figures broke out of the ground. They opened their crimson eyes and stared at Nie Tian and the others. What is this? Jiu Qianxing sensed the violent aura and couldn't help but scream. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and he gestured for everyone to stick together. What appeared around them was a very strange monster. Its body was not too big, only about 100 meters or so. Its entire body was round and black, like a giant silkworm chrysalis, giving people a very uncomfortable feeling. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and he said, "Everyone, be careful. These strange creatures, although their bodies were not big, their aura was very strong. It was even more terrifying than the Earth Monitor lizard that Nie Tian had seen before. Goo goo." At this time, the monster let out a strange cry and rushed over like a small hill. Nie Tian frowned and stabbed out with his sword. The huge sword shadow directly bombarded the monster's body, but it only slightly slowed it down. He was forced to retreat again and again, and the long sword in his hand almost fell out. So strong! Nie Tian stabilized his body, and his face couldn't help but sink. This monster did not look good, but its strength was very strong. Its defense was also very frightening. It took a direct hit from Nie Tian and was not injured at all. In the next moment the other cocoons also attacked. There was a huge bloody hole on its head and it looked very bloody. Nie Qiu and the rest took action and blocked the attacks of the cocoons. Out of everyone present, Cher was undoubtedly the strongest, followed by Nie Tian and Nie Qiu. But Nie Tian did not let Cher take action, but let her and Mo Rushi stand in the center of the group. Nie Tian, what the hell is this? It's so powerful! Jiu Qianxing cried out. It was obvious that he could not hold on any longer. Let's leave. Nie Tian swept out with his sword, and countless sword shadows appeared, forcing the cocoons to retreat a few steps. He then stepped on the ground and flew into the sky. The rest immediately reacted and soared into the sky. The cocoons came out from the ground and obviously could not fly. Nie Tian and the rest could not defeat them, but it was not a problem for them to escape. So. But right at that moment, an ear-piercing sound came out from the void. Nie Tian raised his head to look, and saw that the sky was actually filled with sharp arrows. It was a black mass that covered the sky and covered the earth as they flew over. Shit! The sudden scene caused Nie Tian's gaze to darken, and his face changed. The sharp arrows in the sky were extremely powerful, like rainbows piercing through the sun. They could pierce through the clouds and split rocks. Chapter 1378. The arrows in the sky pressed down like dark clouds, and Nie Tian had no choice but to use the supreme dragon vein, hoping to block the arrows. "Let me help you." Mo Qianjun was extremely calm. He bellowed and immediately released the great sky sword seal, releasing it and enveloping the gigantic dragon. Bang bang bang, in the next moment, the sky full of arrows rained down and struck the gigantic dragon, releasing a loud sound. Nye Tian felt that his body was continuously being attacked, causing all the meridians in his body to tremble. Below, the silkworms that were struck by the arrows were actually unable to withstand the power of the arrows, and instantly became porcupines, releasing ear-piercing screams. Chi! At the same time, Nye Tian and Mo Qianjun were finally unable to withstand it, and spat out a mouthful of blood. The great sky sword seal and the scarlet gold gigantic dragon crumbled at the same time. In the moment of imminent peril, Nye Chio's figure instantly rushed out, his body transforming into a regiment of flames. The berserk blazing power actually incinerated all the arrows in the sky. The corners of Nye Tian's mouth curled up into a smile when he saw this. Nye Chio's body contained the surging starry sky sacred flame. Although the arrows were powerful, they were unable to withstand the burning of the starry sky sacred flame. The silkworms on the ground also obtained a chance to breathe, and all drilled into the ground. Only 2 or 3 of them were heavily injured, and were lying on the ground. After a moment, the rain of arrows finally disappeared, and Nye Tian heaved a sigh of relief. His expression became much more relaxed. At least it was a daunting experience. But just at that moment, a dozen figures suddenly appeared in the sky, angrily rushing towards Nye Tian and the rest. Asshole! The leader was a middle-aged man. He was obviously extremely angry. He looked at Nye Tian coldly, and bellowed, "Do you know, you have ruined my plans?" Nye Tian's gaze froze. He immediately reacted. The people in front of him were the ones who shot the arrows at them. These people almost took the lives of Nye Tian and the rest, but before they could say anything, the other party started to shout and shout, causing Nye Tian to be extremely unhappy. "You're the bastard!" Jiu Qianxing had a fiery temper. He scolded them right away. "You almost killed us. It's fine if you don't apologize, but you actually dare to shout and scream. Do you really think I'm a pushover?" These people obviously didn't want to kill Nye Tian's group. They just wanted to hunt the silkworms. Unfortunately, Nye Tian's group was standing together with the silkworms. "You!" The middle-aged man trembled in anger. "Do you know that we've waited for 3 months to hunt the earth silkworm? You saved the earth silkworm as soon as you arrived. Aren't you B***stards? Earth silkworms, so those monsters were earth silkworms." Nye Tian looked at the middle-aged man. Judging from his aura, this man should be an early-stage low god, even weaker than 1,000 flowing kills. However, the young man beside him had a very steady aura. His strength was definitely above the middle-aged man's. Nye Tian was also depressed. To encounter such a thing as soon as he arrived in the terra firma, he was really unlucky. In this matter, neither side was in the wrong. It could only be said that Nye Tian's group had chosen the wrong place to land. But the other party was really ruthless. They didn't care about their lives and immediately shot arrows. If Nye Chio hadn't released the starry sacred flame, Nye Tian's group would definitely have been injured. "Uncle Ding, forget it." At this time, the young man took a step forward and frowned. In the end, he still cupped his hands towards Nye Tian's group and said, "Everyone, I'm really sorry for what happened just now. Fortunately, you didn't suffer any serious injuries. Here are a few low-grade divine pellet. Please accept them." After saying that, the man handed over a few divine pellets to Nye Tian. His attitude could be considered as sincere. Nye Tian took the divine pellets and smiled helplessly. "Young master, we can't let this matter go. Without the silkworm's crystal, eldest lady's life will be in danger." The middle-aged man frowned and said, "We must make them compensate us for our losses." "Uncle Ding," I said, "forget it." The young man suddenly looked at the middle-aged man and his eyes darkened. He seemed to be a little angry. Sigh. The middle-aged man sighed and finally lowered his head in silence. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He felt that this young man was not bad. He took a step forward and said, I am Nye Tian, a cultivator from the lower plains. I just arrived at the shocking god domain. May I know how to address you? When the young man heard Nye Tian's words, his eyes flickered. He was obviously very surprised. He then said, I am Wang Fulin, from the brilliant Sky City. Are you really from the lower plains? Wang Fulin had a face of doubt. He never thought that Nye Tian's group was actually from the lower plains. The strength of the lower plains was actually so terrifying. They could actually block the armor-piercing arrow. It was really surprising. It should be known that the power of the armor-piercing arrow was something that even the yellow-rank divine beast, the silkworm, could not resist. Wang Fulin sensed the strength of Nye Tian's group. The doubt in his eyes deepened. He even began to doubt Nye Tian's words. Although he did not know much about the lower plains, he had heard that the cultivators of the lower plains could at most reach the peak of the heavenly emperor realm. But Cher and Nye Chio, who were beside Nye Tian, clearly had the strength of a lower god. How was this possible? Brother Wang, we indeed came from the lower plains. Nye Tian knew what Wang Fulin was suspecting. He smiled faintly and said, My two friends had some fortuitous encounters, so they condensed divine sparks. I see. Wang Fulin nodded slightly. However, Wang Fulin was clearly not interested in chatting with Nye Tian. He turned his eyes to the ground and said to the middle-aged man beside him, Uncle Ding, deal with the 3 silkworms on the ground first. Yes. Ding Yuan agreed. He landed on the ground with the people beside him and began to deal with the silkworms. Nye Tian saw Ding Yuan cut open the silkworm's body and took out a fist-sized crystalline object. He could not help but be stunned. He looked at Wang Fulin and said, Brother Wang, may I ask what the silkworm crystal is used for? He had just heard Ding Yuan mention the silkworm crystal, so he guessed that the object they took out was the silkworm crystal. Although it was thousands of meters away from the ground, Nye Tian could still sense that the silkworm crystal contained an extremely violent and terrifying energy. Wang Fulin glanced at Nye Tian. Although he was a little impatient, he still said, The silkworm is a yellow-rank divine beast. It lives thousands of meters below the ground. It absorbs the essence of the Mother Earth all year round and forms a silkworm crystal in its body. It is a kind of thing with an extremely strong life force. Yellow-rank divine beast, Mother Earth, silkworm crystal. Nye Tian listened to Wang Fulin's words and carefully identified the key words. He guessed that the divine beast should be divided into 4 levels: heaven, earth, profound, and yellow. The yellow-rank divine beast was the lowest level divine beast. As for what Mother Earth was, Nye Tian could not guess it. However, he learned an important piece of information from Wang Fulin's words. The silkworm crystal was an extremely precious thing. Chapter 1379. After hearing Wang Fulin's words, Nye Tian became very interested in the Earth silkworm crystal. He speculated that the crystal definitely contained rich divine power. Divine power, this was the power that Nye Tian and the others needed the most at present. Of course. Wang Fulin glanced at Nye Tian and said, The Earth silkworm crystal is a very precious item. When a martial artist absorbs the crystal's power, it can greatly shorten the time to condense a divine spark. I see. Nye Tian nodded slightly, the corners of his mouth curling into a strange smile. He felt that if Mo Qianjun and Jiuqian Sheng could obtain the crystal, they could definitely condense a divine spark in a few years or even a few months. After all, the two had already absorbed some divine power and stayed at peak heavenly emperor realm for a very long time. In Nye Tian's eyes, Mo Qianjun and Jiuqian Sheng's talent was absolutely not below Shui Wushuang's. Since the latter could condense a divine spark in 20 years, then Mo Qianjun and Jiuqian Sheng could condense a divine spark in an even shorter time. However, the Earth silkworms were hunted by Wang Fulin and the others, so the crystal should also belong to them. Originally, they could have hunted more crystal, but sadly, Nye Tian and the others had disrupted the plan. Hence, there were only these 3 earth silkworms in front of them. Brother Wang, I just heard Lord Ding say that you hunted the earth silkworms to obtain the crystal for one person, is that right? Nie Tian's eyes flickered and he suddenly asked. Just now, in his rage, Ding Yuan seemed to have said that without the earth silkworm crystal, eldest young Mrs. Life would be in danger. Wang Fulin nodded solemnly, lowering his guard against Nie Tian. He said, to tell the truth, my little sister was born with a strange disease. She can only survive by relying on the earth silkworm crystal. I hunted the earth silkworms to extend her life. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, somewhat speechless inwardly. The earth silkworm crystal was such a good thing, but it was used to extend one's life. It was truly a pity. But this also showed that Wang Fulin cared about his sister very much. In truth, Nie Tian was somewhat surprised because he sensed that Wang Fulin was only in his 20s. Why was he so strong? After all, it wasn't easy to condense a godhead even in a realm. Even if Wang Fulin had started condensing his godhood the moment he was born, he would definitely be a freak. After thinking about it, Nie Tian felt that there was only one possibility, and that was that Wang Fulin's divine deity was not condensed, but stolen. The so-called plundering of divine deity was to directly fuse with a ready-made divine deity from someone else. This was a very cruel method. Nie Tian's guess wasn't wrong, but it wasn't completely correct either. Wang Fulin's godhood wasn't condensed, but it wasn't stolen either. Instead, it was inherited. Inheriting a godhead was very popular in the realms. This was because the godhead of many fallen divine realm martial artists would be preserved, so these godheads became a hot commodity. Even in various large auction houses, godheads were clearly marked items. For example, if Li Bo's physical body was destroyed by Nie Tian before, if he couldn't reform his physical body within a certain period of time, then the divine sense in his godhead would slowly dissipate, and finally become an ownerless godhead, which would become a commodity. Wang Fulin's godhead was precisely bought. But inheriting a godhead had a huge disadvantage, that was, one's strength basically would not have any increase in the future anymore. They would maintain their current strength for life, and it might even decrease somewhat. Another point was that inheriting a godhead, the martial artist's lifespan was only 1% of the person who condensed the godhead. Which was also to say that a low-god martial artist, if godhead condensed and formed, then his lifespan was 100,000 years. If inherited, his lifespan was only 1,000 years. Even so, inheriting a godhead was still very popular in the realms. After all, people able to condense a godhead within 1,000 years were still in the minority. The limit of a peak heavenly emperor martial artist's lifespan was 1,000 years. Within this 1,000 years, to spend several hundred years to reach peak heavenly emperor, then condense a godhead in the remaining several hundred years, it was a very difficult thing to most people. That kind of long and boring cultivation process, not everyone could endure it. Brother Wang, I'm very curious, how did you guys know that an earth silkworm would appear here? At this time, Nie Tian's gaze turned slightly intent, and he asked with a curious look. Ding Yuan said that they had already waited here for several months, seemingly specifically waiting for an earth silkworm to appear. Wang Fulin nodded slightly and said, My Wang family has an ancestral method to sense earth silkworms. It's us forcing the earth silkworms out from underground. Otherwise, it's impossible for earth silkworms to break out of the ground. Earth silkworms lived several thousand meters deep underground. If there were no unexpected situations, they would not come out for life. Then can you still force the earth silkworms out now? Nie Tian's eyes flickered. He really wanted to obtain the earth silkworm crystal very much. Can't anymore. Wang Fulin sighed and said, Earth silkworm spirituality is very high. After falling for it once, it won't fall for it again. We're going to look for other places next. Moreover, to force the earth silkworm out is also a very slow process, at least several months' time. Nye Tian had black lines all over his face. He finally understood now why Ding Yuan would be so furious just now. Looks like they indeed spoiled Wang Fulin's important matter. Young master, we're done. We can leave now. At this moment, Ding Yuan's figure appeared and directly came to Wang Fulin's side. As he spoke, he glanced at Nye Tian unhappily. Nye Tian was slightly embarrassed and immediately said, "Brother Wang, we've just arrived here and have nowhere to go. Can we go with you?" Nye Tian was very curious about what kind of strange illness Wang Fulin's sister had. She actually needed the earth silkworm crystal to prolong her life. He was too embarrassed to say that he was an alchemist because he was from the lower planes. If he said it, he might be ridiculed by others. "Brat, you've already harmed us once. Do you want to harm us again?" Ding Yuan's face was full of dissatisfaction as he spoke in a cold tone. "Uncle Ding." Wang Fulin was still considered modest. He hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Nye, we're going back to Brilliant Sky City for a while. If you don't mind, you can come with us." "All right." Nye Tian nodded and smiled. Of course, he wouldn't mind. Jiu Qinsheng and the others looked at Nye Tian suspiciously. They didn't know why the latter was wasting time on Wang Fulin. Only Mo Qianjun looked at Nye Tian strangely. He had already guessed that the latter was interested in the earth silkworm crystal. The people around Wang Fulin were extremely unfriendly towards Nye Tian and the others. Their faces were full of malice. However, Nye Tian had a smile on his face and pretended not to notice. After a moment, the group arrived at the periphery of Brilliant Sky mountain range. They were about to walk out of the mountain range. "There's killing intent." At this moment, Nye Tian's expression suddenly changed. He felt a cold wind coming from the void. There was actually frost in the air. A sharp killing intent was suddenly released in the air. Almost at the same time, Cher's beautiful eyes flickered. She was surprised and looked up into the sky. Chapter 1380. In the land of Crimson Moon, at the periphery of the Brilliant Sky mountain range, just as Nye Tian and the others were about to leave, more than a dozen black-robed cultivators suddenly appeared in the void above them. "Be careful!" Nye Tian was the first to react. His face darkened and he roared. He directly slashed out with his sword. Void black flames rolled out and there was an ear-piercing tearing sound in the air. The overwhelming cold wind was extremely sharp, and it directly shattered Nye Tian's sword shadow. Then, it turned into cold air and pressed down violently. "What a cold aura!" Wang Fulin frowned and then punched out. The violent power condensed into a huge fist shadow in the air, but it was directly frozen by the cold air and then shattered in the void. Everyone hurriedly retreated. The next moment, the cold air rolled down and the trees and rocks within 1,000 meters were instantly frozen and then cut into pieces by the sharp blades. Nye Tian's figure stabilized. Looking at everything in front of him, he could not help but tremble. The cold air was too powerful. It directly raised everything within 1,000 meters to the ground. And such a violent aura was released by more than a dozen black-robed cultivators together. More than a dozen black-clothed figures hovered in the air, staring at Nye Tian and the others with cold, murderous eyes. The coldness in their eyes was oppressive. Nye Tian's divine sense swept over and his heart sank. These black-robed cultivators were all divine realm cultivators. The leader's aura was even comparable to Zhao Zi's. He should be an intermediate god expert. This is bad. Nye Tian's heart sank and his eyes could not help but tremble. These black-robed cultivators obviously did not want to kill just now. They just wanted to intimidate them so no one was injured. Then, the black-clothed man in the lead descended a little, looked at Nye Tian with a gloomy gaze and said coldly, "Are you people from the 14th plane world?" "The 14th plane world?" Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He immediately realized that this person might be talking about the divine realm of the heaven realm. It seemed like these people already knew that they would appear, so they had been waiting for them. Nie Tian immediately understood that Sher's awakening must have caused a huge commotion that alerted the entire God Realmverse. These people in front of him should be from the 12 shrines. You are not from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. It was at this moment that Ding Yuan, who was next to Wang Fulin, stepped forward. His eyes suddenly darkened as he said, "Those who are not from the Crimson Moon Divine Palace are not allowed to step into the Crimson Moon Land. This is against the rules of the awakening God realm." Ding Yuan was quite knowledgeable and had some understanding of the 12 divine palaces. He could already tell that the person in front of him was probably from the Divine Glacial Palace. The Glacial Divine Palace was the sworn enemy of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Why would the people of the Glacial Divine Palace appear here? Humph! The middle-aged man laughed coldly as his lips curled up in a cold smile. With a wave of his hand, a beam of cold chi pierced through the air, transforming into a sharp blade that flew towards Ding Yuan. Bang! A muffled sound rang out and Ding Yuan was sent flying before he could even react. A horrifying wound appeared on his body, and he was frozen into a human stick. Not good! Seeing this, Nie Tian's heart sank. His figure flickered and he appeared next to Ding Yuan. A ball of fire surged out of his palm and directly entered Ding Yuan's body. Ding Yuan's stiff face showed a slight reaction. The black-robed man's face sank when he saw this scene. He thought to himself, "This kid's fire is a bit strange. It can actually disperse my icy wind power." The icy wind power was a very strange kind of divine power that contained both the ice attribute and the wind attribute. Fortunately, Nie Tian reacted quickly. Otherwise, when the icy wind power invaded Ding Yuan's body, his internal organs would have been frozen in an instant and he would have died without a doubt. Nie Tian used the Starry Sky's sacred flame to help Ding Yuan disperse the icy wind power and save his life. "Thank you." Ding Yuan was still in shock. It took him a long time to recover, and he thanked Nie Tian with an embarrassed expression. Nie Tian nodded slightly and looked at the black-robed man. He asked in a deep voice, "May I know who you are?" This black-robed man was extremely ruthless. He killed without saying a word. It was clear how cruel he was. A heavenly Emperor realm cultivator is actually not afraid of my icy wind power. Interesting. The man did not seem to hear Nie Tian's words and muttered to himself. His eyes then landed on Sher and he said faintly, "But my purpose for coming here is her." Ding Yuan guessed correctly. These people were from the Cold Palace. They had come here for Shuer. The leader was called Yang Li. He was an outer court elder of the Cold Wind Palace's Cold Wind Palace. He was ordered by the Cold Palace's Palace Master Ling Feng to come to the Crimson Moon Land to find someone. A few days ago, they had already snatched away a godly realm expert from the Heaven World's celestial realm. If Nie Tian was present at that time, he would know that the person who was snatched away by the Cold Palace was none other than Duguanai. This time, Yang Li and the others came for Sher. But to Yang Li's surprise, he also found another godly realm expert, Nie Chio. In addition, Nie Tian's strength was also very strange. It was not weaker than an early-stage low-god realm expert. Yang Li even felt that Nie Tian's talent was even more terrifying than Sher and Nie Chio. But his purpose for coming here was Sher. Therefore, Nie Tian and the others were not in his consideration. Huh! Nie Tian saw that Yang Li was looking at Sher with a strange gaze. His brows sank and his face darkened. These people were indeed here for Sher. "Little girl, I am the outer court elder of the Cold Palace, Yang Li. I will give you a chance to join the Cold Palace." Yang Li didn't pay any attention to Nie Tian. He looked at Shuer with a burning gaze and spoke in a low voice. Snow didn't even look at him, completely ignoring his words. She just stood there quietly like an icy mountain, as if nothing around her could affect her state of mind. It was as if Sher did not care about what was happening in front of her. "Little girl, I am talking to you." Yang Li's eyes darkened. He did not expect Sher to react in such a way. He felt extremely humiliated. The coldness around him intensified and the surrounding space started to freeze. Big Sister Rushi, let's go. Shui ignored him and said to Emo Rushi beside her. Bastard! This time, Yang Li was completely infuriated. He roared and slammed his palm down. Boundless coldness condensed into a giant ice hand and smashed down like a glacier. Yang Li had not lost his mind. He did not dare to hurt Sher because Ling Feng had ordered him to capture her alive. He could tell that Sher cared a lot about Emo Rushi. Therefore, he attacked her directly. Rushi! Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw this. He let out a cry and soared into the sky. Black flames of nothingness bloomed around him. He thrust his long sword forward, and a flaming sword shadow shot out. Boom! The sword shadow was heavy and bombarded the giant ice hand. A violent explosion sounded and the giant ice hand was directly shattered. Chapter 1381. My lord! Nie Chio sensed that Nie Tian was trapped and cried out in alarm. Immediately after, he transformed into a ball of flames and flew out, forcibly breaking through the frozen space. Nie Tian and Nie Chio landed at the same time. They were equally shocked. Yang Li was indeed very powerful. A casual palm strike from him was so terrifying. Yang Li frowned slightly. His face turned gloomy and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He was afraid that he would injure Sher, so he did not use his full strength. But it would be extremely difficult for an ordinary low god to block his palm strike. Nie Tian was just a heavenly emperor, but he was able to block his palm strike. It was really strange. To Yang Li, who was a mid-stage mid-god, it was simply a humiliation. Wang Fulin and the others were also dumbstruck. They did not expect Nie Tian's strength to be so frightening. Wang Fulin reckoned that even if he was an early-stage low god, he would not be a match for Nie Tian. Nie Tian, are you all right? At this moment, Sher looked at Nie Tian. Her beautiful eyes flickered and she seemed a little impatient. I'm fine, Nie Tian said and slightly shook his head, indicating to Sher not to attack. There were too many people here. Moreover, there were people from the Divine Cold Palace. It would not be good if they witnessed Sher's strength. Sher knitted her brows slightly. She did not say anything and only nodded. Although she was still unfamiliar with Nie Tian, she had a strange feeling about him. Whenever Nie Tian was injured, she would feel inexplicably flustered. But whenever Nie Tian said something, she would subconsciously accept it. Little girl, I'll give you one last chance. Will you join the Divine Cold Palace? At this moment, Yang Li had lost his patience. The murderous intent in his eyes intensified. Not interested. This time, Sher finally replied, but it was an extremely cold refusal. Wang Fulin and Ding Yuan stood rooted to the spot. They didn't know who Shui and the others were that could make glacial divine palaces people break the agreement between the 12 god palaces and step into the Scarlet Moonland to find them. What was even stranger was that Sher didn't care about the Divine Cold Palace at all. The frigid Divine Palace was one of the 12 sacred palaces. Cultivators from all realms dreamed of joining one of the 12 sacred palaces. However, Sher didn't care at all. It was as if in her eyes, the 12 shrines were nothing but trash. She didn't even have the desire to look at them. Damned girl, you're courting death. Yang Li finally lost his patience. With a roar, killing intent rose from his body. At this moment, Yang Li's killing intent had been aroused. The Cold Palace Master had told him that it would be best if he could convince Sher to join the Cold Palace, but if he couldn't, then he would kill her. If you can't get it, then you can only destroy it. Oh ho! However, at this moment, an extremely playful voice sounded, laughing wildly. The people of the Cold Palace are so overbearing. She doesn't want to join you, so you want to kill her? How can there be such logic in this world? As the voice fell, a figure appeared. It was a short and fat man with a round body. His body was the same size as Jean de Bayo. As soon as the short and fat man appeared, More than a dozen cultivators also appeared behind him, all of them very aggressive. Pang San. When Yang Li saw the short and fat man, he was stunned for a moment before shouting out a name. The newcomer was called Pang San, and he was from the Azure Sun Palace. The brilliant Sky Mountain Range was located at the border of several divine palaces. Cher's awakening alarmed the 12 sacred palaces. Those divine palaces that were too far away from the Scarlet Moonland couldn't come, but the divine palaces that were adjacent to the Scarlet Moonland wouldn't give up this opportunity. They all wanted to absorb super geniuses into their divine palaces. Yang Li, this is the Scarlet Moonland, it's under the jurisdiction of the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace. Pang San looked at Yang Li and laughed. Although the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace is almost dead these past few years, at least the name of the Divine Palace still exists. Aren't you afraid of angering those people by coming to the Scarlet Moonland to snatch people? It's not a good thing to break the rules they set. Pang San's eyes flickered as if he was threatening Yang Li. Humph. Yang Li sneered and said, Pang San, you said that the Cold Palace is snatching people, then why did you bring so many people here? Pang San laughed and said, the people of the 12 divine palaces all know that the Azure Sun Palace and the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace are friendly. The palace master asked me to bring my subordinates to the Scarlet Moonland to have a fellowship party. Do you have any objections? You. Yang Li was so angry that his face was as gloomy as water. He couldn't speak for a while. Only Pang San could come up with such an excuse to have a fellowship party. Even a 3-year-old wouldn't believe it. The Azure Sun Palace and the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace used to have a good relationship in the past, but in the past few hundred years, the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace's power had declined and was on the verge of collapse. At this time, who wouldn't want to take advantage of the situation? If the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace fell, the Azure Sun Palace would not hesitate to take over the territory under their jurisdiction. Nie Tian was stunned watching from the side. It seemed that the Cold Palace was not the only one who had designs on Cher. How can the Medicine King Divine Palace miss out on such a lively event like a fellowship party? Just at this moment, the space trembled slightly and another figure descended from the sky. It was a middle-aged man in white robes. He was handsome and held a folding fan in his hand. He looked gentle and refined, but his eyes were filled with malice. Zhang Chenzong. Pang San and Yang Li were stunned at the same time when they saw the person's face. Another divine palace has appeared. Nie Tian frowned at this moment and his face sank slightly. He said in his heart, this is the Scarlet Moonland, a place under the jurisdiction of the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace. The people from the other divine palaces have appeared, but the people from the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace have not appeared. It seems that the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace is indeed inferior to the other divine palaces. The people from the Cold Palace, the Azure Sun Palace, and the Medicine King Divine Palace had appeared one after another, but the people from the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace had not appeared. This made Nie Tian very depressed. Wang Fulin and the others were completely dumbfounded and petrified on the spot. What was the background of Nie Tian and the others? They had just arrived at the God-shocking domain, and they had already alarmed the people from the 3 divine palaces. This was too strange. Yang Li looked at Zhang Chenzong from the palace of the Divine Medicine King. His eyes narrowed and his expression turned ugly. If he had known that the people from the other divine palaces would come so quickly, he would not have delayed and would have directly killed Cher and the others. Unfortunately, it was too late for him to act now. It seems that the huge sword momentum has alarmed a lot of people. Zhang Chenzong's figure landed. He had actually come here alone. His gloomy eyes landed on Cher, and then his eyes flickered as if he was very surprised. Then he smiled and said, this girl is really powerful. The Medicine King Divine Palace wants her. His faint voice fell, but it was full of overbearing. Zhang Chenzong's words made the scene fall into a dead silence. Everyone looked at him with gloomy eyes. Chapter 1382. As soon as the people from Divine Medicine King Palace arrived, they were extremely overbearing and even directly ignored Cold God Palace and Qingyang God Palace. Yang Li and Pang San glanced at each other. Although they were unwilling, they did not stand up to oppose. Obviously, they were very afraid of Zhang Qinzong. Although the 12 palaces were side by side, there were strong and weak ones. They were divided into 3 levels, 4 upper palaces, 4 middle palaces and 4 lower palaces. Red Moon Divine Palace undoubtedly belonged to the 4 lower palaces, but it was at the bottom of the 4 palaces. Qingyang God Palace also belonged to the 4 lower palaces, but it was much stronger than Red Moon Divine Palace. Cold God Palace belonged to the 4 middle palaces and was much stronger than Qingyang God Palace. While Divine Medicine King Palace belonged to the 4 upper palaces, its overall strength was much stronger than Cold God Palace. More importantly, Zhang Qinzong was a ruthless person who killed without batting an eyelid. If Yang Li and Pang San dared to stand up against him, he would definitely kill them without hesitation. Zhang Qinzong's strength might not be above Yang Li and Pang San, but he dared to kill them. Zhang Qinzong was from Divine Medicine King Palace. It was fine if he killed Yang Li or Pang San. Cold God Palace and Qingyang God Palace would not dare to pursue the matter. But if Yang Li or Pang San killed Zhang Qinzong, Divine Medicine King Palace would never let it go. This world was cruel, and strength always had the greatest right to speak. Little girl, come with me. Zhang Qinzong's gaze swept across the crowd and finally locked on Cher. He smiled sinisterly and said, joining Divine Medicine King Palace is definitely not a choice that will benefit you for life. Not interested. Cher glanced cold at Zhang Qinzong and gave the same answer as before. Snow's reply stunned everyone present. Countless gazes focused on her, their faces filled with astonishment. Directly rejecting the invitation of Divine Medicine King Palace, one of the 4 upper palaces, was too domineering. Zhang Qinzong's eyes darkened. He was obviously very angry, but he did not flare up on the spot. Instead, he laughed and said, little girl, you may not know what kind of existence Divine Medicine King Palace is. Let me tell you, the Medicine King Divine Palace is the true peak force of the startling God domain. The likes of Icy Cold God Palace and Azure Sun God Palace are nothing in front of the Medicine King Divine Palace. Zhang Qinzong slandered the Divine Cold Palace and the Divine Medicine King Palace in front of Yang Li and Pang San, but the latter 2 could only listen. Young girl, as long as you join our medicine. Zhang Qinzong smiled again. He wanted to continue, but he was interrupted by Gu Ning. Not interested, Cher said cold. Her eyes were filled with impatience. She didn't want to listen to Zhang Qinzong's nonsense anymore. She directly said to Nie Tian, let's go. Nie Tian was stunned, and he complained incessantly in his heart. If he could leave, he would have done so long ago. Cher obviously didn't understand the current situation, but she couldn't be blamed. After all, she was too naive. Zhang Qinzong was ignored again. Finally, he couldn't contain the anger in his heart. His face darkened. He waved the folding fan in his hand in the air, and a huge mighty force was released. It directly shrouded Nie Tian. Nie Tian frowned when he sensed something. He moved, wanting to avoid it, but he found that the space around him had been sealed. Boom! The next moment, a huge force fell and shrouded Nie Tian. Boundary! In an instant, Nie Tian realized that he was trapped by Zhang Qinzong's boundary. Nie Tian frowned. He spread out his divine sense, and was shocked to find that this boundary was very powerful. It made him feel a suffocating pressure. Nie Tian! Mo Rushi and the others cried out when they saw Nie Tian was trapped. Zhang Qinzong was a mid-stage mid-god expert, almost 2 great realms higher than Nie Tian. How could Nie Tian fight him? At the sight of this, Shui Er's eyes flickered, and a chilling expression appeared on her exquisite face. Little girl, I will ask you again. Are you willing to join the Divine Medicine King Palace? Zhang Chenzong smiled sinisterly. He looked coldly at Nie Tian and said, "Pay attention, your answer will determine whether he lives or not." The boundary deployed by Zhang Chenzong was enough to suppress a mid-stage low-god expert to death. Nie Tian only had the strength of a heavenly emperor. Zhang Chenzong certainly didn't think that Nie Tian could withstand the suppression of the boundary. Zhang Chenzong could see that Cher seemed to be very worried about Nie Tian. That was why she used the latter as a threat. A bitter smile appeared at the corner of Nie Tian's mouth as he stood in the ward. He had never expected that he would be used as a bargaining chip one day. But he quickly calmed down. He activated the holographic divine veins and carefully sensed the boundary above his head, trying to find its weak point. Cher turned to look at Nie Tian. Her beautiful eyes flickered. Then, she stared at Zhang Chenzong and said, "Let him go." "I can let him go, but you have to come with me," Zhang Chenzong said with a sinister smile. Yang Li, Pang San, and the others felt a chill in their hearts when they saw Zhang Chenzong's smile. They knew Zhang Chenzong very well, and knew that even if Shui left with him, he would still die beyond the shadow of a doubt. "You've angered me." Cher's eyes were as calm as water. She suddenly opened her mouth and a blood-red long sword appeared in her hand. An enormous sword momentum soared into the sky as though it was going to tear the world apart. The surrounding people retreated under the impact of the sword momentum. "Oh no, Cher is going to attack." Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw that Cher was enraged. He really didn't want to see Cher expose her strength. Moreover, he wasn't sure if Cher was a match for Zhang Chenzong. Although Cher had once defeated Du Guanai with a single strike, Du Guanai and Zhang Chenzong were clearly not on the same level. "You want to fight me?" Zhang Chenzong coldly snickered. "Very well, let me test your strength and see how strong you are. I'll defeat you with a single strike." Cher didn't seem to hear Zhang Chenzong's words. The corner of her mouth slightly trembled. She repeated what she said when she fought against Du Guanai. How arrogant! Zhang Chenzong creased his brows. Even Lord Xing would be enraged to be looked down upon by an early-stage low god. "Little girl, today I'll let you know that there's always someone better than you out there." Zhang Chenzong bellowed and swept the folding fan in his hand horizontally. An earth-shattering wave surged out and turned into thousands upon thousands of raging waves that surged towards Cher. The attack of a mid-stage mid-god was extremely majestic, like the mountains and the seas, forcing the crowd to retreat. "Watch out, Cher." Nie Tian's eyes darkened when he saw this scene. Immediately, sword will surged out from his body. A murderous sword will bloomed and bombarded the invisible boundary. Boom! A loud and crisp sound rang out, and the barrier shattered in response. At the same time, Cher's figure soared into the sky. She thrust out the long sword in her hand and a crimson sword shadow appeared. It was as though a vast expanse of red had covered half the sky. The violent sword momentum exploded and a blood-red sword will surged out to meet the raging waves in the sky. Rumble! The next moment, a loud explosion was heard in the sky, followed by an ear-piercing noise. The figures of Cher and Zhang Chenzong were completely submerged in the raging airwaves. The crowd stared blankly at the void. Their eyes were dull and lifeless. After a long time, the airwaves in the sky dissipated, and two figures appeared, standing in the void. When the crowd saw the two figures, they were immediately petrified. High up in the sky, Zhang Chenzong was covered in blood and looked extremely miserable. Chapter 1383. On the outskirts of the brilliant sky mountain range, all eyes were staring at the two silhouettes in the void. They were dumbfounded and their expressions were lifeless. Zhang Chenzong was defeated? A mid-stage mid-god from the palace of Divine Medicine King was defeated by an early-stage low-god. Moreover, he was defeated in such a straightforward manner. Just one sword strike and he was seriously injured. If they did not see it with their own eyes, they would never believe it. Hiss! After a long while, The crowd came to their senses and gasped in unison. Their faces were still filled with shock. Their expressions were saying, "How is this possible?" In everyone's eyes, the scene before their eyes was impossible. Cher only had the strength of an early-stage low-god, while Zhang Qinzong had the strength of a mid-stage mid-god. If the two were separated by a minor realm, it would be understandable. But the two were separated by a major realm and a minor realm. Even Yang Li and Pang San, who were experts who had seen countless battles between godly state martial artists, were shocked at this moment. For a god realm warrior to be able to skip a minor realm was already considered a genius. Someone like Shui, who was able to skip an entire realm and a minor realm, was simply a freakish genius. The most terrifying thing was that the crowd could not understand how Cher defeated Zhang Qinzong. No matter from which aspect, Zhang Qinzong's strength was far above Cher's. Nie Tian was also stunned. His mouth was wide open and he couldn't make a sound for a long time. Cher could defeat Duguanai because she could ignore the weakening of the 100 virtual body. In addition, she had the power of the 3 lives meridian and the suppression of the godhead. Therefore, it was still normal. But now, Cher defeated Zhang Qinzong with 1 sword strike. This was extremely abnormal. You! Puff! Just at this moment, Zhang Qinzong opened his mouth. But as soon as he opened his mouth, his body trembled and he spurted out a mouthful of blood. His face turned as pale as paper. But he still raised his head and looked at Cher with a frightened face. He said a few words, "Your sword art realm, sword art realm." Although Zhang Qinzong hadn't finished speaking, Nie Tian was stunned, and then he understood. Cher had defeated Zhang Qinzong with a single sword strike by relying on her sword Dao realm. Whether it was martial physique or godhead, Cher was below Zhang Qinzong. The reason why she could defeat him with a single sword strike was because of her sword Dao realm. As far as Nie Tian knew, the highest level of insight into the Tao of the sword was Omega Sword Mysteries. However, he had discovered long ago that each time Cher struck out with her sword intent would erupt with terrifying power. It was far beyond what an ordinary profound swordsman could compare to. There was no doubt that there was a higher level of the sword Tao above the sword profundity. It seemed that after Cher absorbed Wan Jian's legacy and awakened Wan Jian's bloodline, she had not only gained strength, but also an extraordinary level of swordsmanship. However, Nie Tian couldn't imagine what level Cher's sword Dao had reached at this moment. With his current strength and realm, he would probably be left in the dust. Cher's expression was calm. She didn't even look at Zhang Qinzong. She said indifferently, "If I wanted to kill you, you would already be a corpse by now. Now we are leaving this place. Does anyone have any objections?" Her calm voice sounded like a clap of thunder from the 9th heaven, exploding in everyone's ears. It was obvious that Cher had not used her full strength in that sword strike. She had held back. An early-stage low-god, a mid-stage mid-god, and she had held back. It was a mystery what the limit of Cher's strength was. Nie Tian was shocked. His eyes trembled violently. He was thinking, if Nie Qiu hadn't injected the seal left behind by the Sword Elder into Cher's body, how terrifying would Cher's strength be at this moment? At the very least, she would be comparable to a high god. Nie Tian said in his heart. He knew that the seal had greatly suppressed Cher's strength. He even felt that if it wasn't for the seal in Cher's body, she would have been a top-notch expert that could shock the entire divine realms. Cher is really terrifying. I must find the Emperor of the Underworld that Ni Jianming mentioned as soon as possible and figure out Cher's true identity. Nie Tian said in his heart. He looked somewhat excited. Cher's figure landed beside Mo Rushi. Her expression became gentle again. She smiled faintly and said, "Sister Rushi, let's go. The blood of these people is too dirty. I don't want to stay here." Nie Tian was speechless. The current state of Cher was completely different from the state of a swordsman who defeated Zhang Qinzong. Nie Tian. Mo Rushi finally reacted. She looked at Nie Tian and called out softly. Yes, let's go. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He was ready to leave this place first. At this moment, Zhang Qinzong's eyes suddenly turned to Nie Tian. His eyes suddenly trembled and his face was full of astonishment. He had clearly trapped Nie Tian with a boundary. How did the latter escape? The power of the boundary was enough to oppress a mid-stage low god to death. In order to break through the boundary, one must at least have the strength of a mid-god. How could Nie Tian, a mere heavenly emperor realm martial artist, break through his boundary? This kid is also a monster. Zhang Qinzong's eyes flickered violently. His voice was trembling in his heart. He even felt that if Nie Tian advanced to the divine realm, he might be even more terrifying than Cher. No! Suddenly, Zhang Qinzong roared in his heart and shouted, We must inform Palace Lord of these people. If they really join Red Moon Divine Palace, I'm afraid there will be great changes in this year's grand competition of the 12 shrines. If Nie Tian and Cher joined Red Moon Divine Palace, with just these two people, Red Moon Divine Palace would be able to achieve good results in the Heavenly Emperor Realm competition and the Low God ranking competition. Zhang Qinzong even felt that judging by Nie Tian and Cher's strength, they could even take the first place on the Heavenly Emperor list and the Low God list. If that was really the case, Red Moon Divine Palace would soar to the sky. No, I absolutely cannot allow this to happen, Zhang Qinzong screamed in his heart. Then, his figure moved and he left immediately. Zhang Qinzong's sudden departure made Nie Tian's eyes narrow. He felt a little strange. At this moment, the people from Arctic Divine Palace and Qingyang Divine Palace also understood something and quickly left. Yang Li and Pang San thought of the situation that Zhang Qinzong was thinking of and immediately left, ready to return to the palace to report everything. Even Zhang Qinzong was defeated by Cher. Yang Li and Pang San, of course, would not ask for trouble. In the blink of an eye, the people from the 3 major divine palaces disappeared, leaving only Nie Tian and his group. This is bad. I'm afraid the people from the 3 major divine palaces will not let Cher go. Nie Tian frowned and his face became much gloomier. At this moment, he finally understood why the Sword Elder, Sakura, and I Jianming and the others had repeatedly warned him not to let Shui take action. Because Cher's strength was really too strong. She could defeat a mid-stage mid-god expert with a casual move. It would be strange if such strange strength did not attract attention. I have to go to Red Moon Divine Palace as soon as possible. That place is still considered a safe place, Nie Tian said in his heart. He immediately called Wang Fulin and the others to leave. Wang Fulin, Ding Yuan and the others finally reacted. They looked at Nie Tian and the others in shock. They actually subconsciously distanced themselves from Cher, not daring to approach her. Chapter 1384. After a while, Nie Tian and the others finally walked out of the Brilliant Sky mountain range and soon arrived at Brilliant Sky City. Along the way, he talked a lot with Wang Fulin and learned that Wang Fulin's father was the city lord of Brilliant Sky City. Brilliant Sky City was just a small city in the entire Scarlet Moonland. It was not strong. However, this place was a mix of good and bad people. After all, it was located at the border of several divine palaces. Ding Yuan, who was next to Wang Fulin, was the city lord mansion's housekeeper and the former's personal guard. Under Wang Fulin's lead, Nie Tian and the others soon arrived at the city lord mansion. Just as they were about to enter the mansion, Nie Tian frowned and suddenly looked up into the sky. Above the void, the space shook slightly. Then, several figures appeared, each with a powerful aura. Nie Tian saw the face of the person in the lead, but he smiled bitterly and murmured, "They're finally here. This efficiency is too low." The person in the sky was none other than Zhao Zi. "Mr. Nie Tian, you've finally arrived at the territory." As soon as Zhao Zi saw Nie Tian and the others, he laughed heartily and waved his hand. The people behind him disappeared into the void, hiding themselves. Mr. Zhao, you're too late. Nie Tian smiled speechlessly. Looking at Zhao Zi's reaction, he obviously didn't know that the other divine palaces had appeared. Zhao Zi's figure landed and frowned slightly. Seeing that Nie Tian and the others had strange expressions, he couldn't help saying, "Did the icy cold divine palace appear again?" A few days ago, when Duguanai came to Scarlet Moonland, Zhao Zi was ordered to find him, but the icy cold divine palace took him away first. For this, he was reprimanded by Qi Yefeng. Looking at Nie Tian's reaction now, it was obvious that he had met the icy cold divine palace. Not only the people from the icy cold palace, but also the people from the Qingyang palace and the Medicine King divine palace. Nie Tian shook his head and smiled, briefly explaining what had happened before. As soon as Zhao Zi heard Nie Tian's words, her face sank and she roared, "These 3 divine palaces are too impudent. They actually ignored the agreement between the 12 divine palaces and openly came to the Scarlet Moon Land to snatch people. They simply don't put our Scarlet Moon divine palace in their eyes." Nie Tian shook his head and smiled. He glanced at Zhao Zi speechlessly and thought to himself, with the efficiency of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, even I wouldn't put them in my eyes. The Brilliant Sky Mountain Range was the territory of the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace, but Zhao Zi and the rest were the last to arrive. Compared to the other divine palaces, the Scarlet Moon Divine Palace was far inferior. "Mr. Nie Tian, are you all right?" Zhao Zi glanced at Nie Tian and the others. When he saw that Nie Tian and the others were fine, he was puzzled. He was very curious about how Nie Tian and the others could escape under the nose of the 3 divine palaces. "It's fine." Nie Tian nodded slightly and didn't explain too much. He was still depressed about Cher exposing her strength, so how could he tell the truth to Zhao Zi? Even if he said so, Zhao Zi probably wouldn't believe him. Nie Tian had already told Wang Fulin not to tell anyone about Cher. "Brother Nie, this is..." At this time, Wang Fulin reacted and walked to Nie Tian's side. "Brother Wang, this is the outer sect elder of the Red Moon Divine Palace, Lord Zhao Zi." Nie Tian quickly introduced to Wang Fulin and said, "Lord Zhao, this is the young city lord of the Brilliant Sky City, Lord Wang Fulin." Zhao Zi took a glance at Wang Fulin and seemed to have recalled something. He said, "Wang Qianyuan is your father, right?" "Yes, my father." Wang Fulin was stunned. He didn't expect Zhao Zi to know his father. He bowed and said, "Do you know my father? Your father had once visited the Red Moon Divine Palace. It seemed to be for your sister's strange illness. However, the Pill Hall Elder didn't meet him." Zhao Zi said plainly. For a small force like the Brilliant Sky City, it was indeed difficult for them to meet the Red Moon Divine Palace Elder. When Wang Fulin heard Zhao Zi's words, his expression suddenly changed. He was furious and said solemnly, "So my father was injured by the Red Moon Divine Palace. No wonder he wasn't willing to tell me." And Zhao Zi noticed that Wang Fulin's mood wasn't right. He frowned and said, "Young man, watch your words. Don't slander the Red Moon Divine Palace. When your father came to the Red Moon Divine Palace, I was the one in charge of receiving him. The Pill Hall Elder is an important figure. It's reasonable that he didn't have the time to meet him. When did he injure him?" Zhao Zi remembered that 5 to 6 years ago, Wang Qianyuan brought a 10-year-old girl to the Red Moon Divine Palace and requested to meet the Pill Hall Elder. He was in charge of bringing Wang Qianyuan to the Pill Hall. As for what happened after that, he didn't know. However, Wang Fulin said that Wang Qianyuan was injured by someone. This was obviously impossible. Why would I slander the Red Moon Divine Palace? Wang Fulin frowned and said solemnly, "Back then, my father brought my sister to the Red Moon Divine Palace to seek medical treatment. He brought along 100 silkworm crystals. However, when my father returned, the silkworm crystals were snatched away." He was also severely injured and is still bedridden. Do you think I would make up a story? This. Zhao Zi's expression sank. He was obviously embarrassed. Wang Fulin's mood wasn't fake. Could it be that something really happened back then? When Ye Tian heard this, his expression changed slightly. It was obvious that he was angry. He could faintly tell that Wang Qianyuan brought the silkworm crystals to the Red Moon Divine Palace to seek medical treatment. The people from the Red Moon Divine Palace must have taken a fancy to his silkworm crystals and snatched them away. Then, they injured him and chased him out of the Red Moon Divine Palace. If the Red Moon Divine Palace really did that, it would be too much. It's fine if he couldn't seek medical treatment, but why did he snatch someone's things and injure him? Young Master Wang, the silkworm crystals you mentioned, are they the earth silkworm crystals? At this moment, Zhao Zi's eyes flickered and he suddenly asked. Yes. Wang Fulin's attitude changed completely. He replied cold. That's impossible. Zhao Zi raised his eyebrows and said, Earthworms live thousands of meters underground. Even a high god would have to expend a great deal of effort to force them out. Could it be that your father's strength is stronger than that of a high god? He couldn't even force the earth silkworm out. How could he use 100 silkworm crystals to seek medical treatment? My Wang family has an ancestral method that can force the earth silkworm out. Those 100 silkworm crystals were accumulated by my father for 6 years. Do you think I would lie? Wang Fulin was extremely angry. He didn't expect that Zhao Zi would still doubt him. Lord Zhao. Zhao Zi still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Nye Tian. The latter said, I can prove that the Wang family indeed has a unique method to hunt the earth silkworm. It's not difficult for the Wang family to obtain 100 silkworm crystals. Nye Tian had seen the method Wang Fulin used to hunt the earth silkworm with his own eyes. The latter was absolutely not lying. This. Zhao Zi was stunned. He didn't expect that Nye Tian would speak up for Wang Fulin. Chapter 1385. Huh! Wang Fulin was stunned when he heard Nye Tian's words. From the latter's tone, it seemed that he did not even put the Red Moon Palace master in his eyes. Zhao Zi was also taken aback as he fixed Nye Tian with an embarrassed look on his face. He knew that Nye Tian must be angry. Brother Wang, let's go inside and talk. Nye Tian nodded slightly and said solemnly. He dared to say such a thing, of course, he had confidence in his heart. He naturally knew that his strength was completely incomparable to the Red Moon Palace Master, but he also knew that the current Red Moon Divine Palace was in a precarious situation. Icy Cold Divine Palace, Qingyang Divine Palace, and Medicine King Divine Palace had openly come to the Red Moon Divine Palace's territory to show off their strength, but the Red Moon Divine Palace didn't even have a chance to retaliate. This showed how weak they were. It was precisely because of this that Nye Tian had the capital to talk to the Red Moon Palace Master fairly. The next grand competition of the 12 Divine Palaces would determine the survival of the Red Moon Divine Palace, and the key figures in this grand competition were Nye Tian and the others. Nye Tian had a keen sense of smell and had already perceived this from Zhao Zi's attitude towards him. After a while, Nye Tian and the others came to the main hall of the City Lord Mansion. Brother Nye, I have already asked Uncle Ding to invite my father, please wait a moment. Wang Fulin nodded slightly and smiled at Nye Tian. Zhao Zi looked slightly nervous. He had a faint sense of foreboding. What Wang Fulin said just now was very likely to be true. He hoped that this matter would not change Nye Tian's attitude towards the Red Moon Divine Palace. Not long after, Ding Yuan's figure appeared, and 2 servants of the City Lord Mansion carried a chair into the hall. Sitting on it was a middle-aged man with an old face. He was thin and pale, and it was obvious that he had been suffering from illness for a long time. Father! Wang Fulin immediately stood up, bowed slightly to the middle-aged man, and introduced him to Nye Tian. Brother Nye, this is my father. When Nye Tian saw Wang Qinyuan's morbid state, His eyes tightened and his face became even gloomier. Young Master Nye, this old man is ill and unable to stand. Forgive me for my lack of manners. Wang Qianyuan nodded slightly to Nye Tian. Ding Yuan had just told him some things, so he had some understanding of Nye Tian's identity. City Lord Wang is too polite. Nye Tian nodded slightly. Wang Qianyuan seemed to be an honest and dutiful person. It seemed that what Wang Fulin had said was true. At this moment, Wang Qianyuan looked at Zhao Zi with a very serious expression. But he still spoke. Lord Zhao, long time no see. City Lord Wang, you. Zhao Zi frowned when she saw that Wang Qianyuan was injured so badly. Her face darkened a lot. All those years ago, Wang Qianyuan was a godly realm expert no matter what. Yet now, he was bedridden. How could they not sigh? City Lord Wang, I want to know what happened back then. Please tell me in detail. Nye Tian glanced at Zhao Zi and said to Wang Qianyuan. Sigh. Wang Qianyuan let out a long sigh. It was obvious that he was avoiding the topic. He said, It's all in the past. Don't mention it. Nye Tian frowned. Of course, he understood that Wang Qianyuan didn't want to offend the Red Moon Divine Palace. This was also the reason why he didn't tell the truth to Wang Fulin all these years. City Lord Wang, tell me, if someone from the Red Moon Divine Palace is greedy for your silkworm crystal and injured him, I will personally report to the Palace Lord and seek justice for you. Zhao Zi stepped forward and said with a serious expression. He was a smart person. If he didn't say something at this time, Nye Tian's impression of the Red Moon Divine Palace would be even worse. Lord Zhao, Wang Qianyuan heard Zhao Zi's words. His eyes trembled and revealed a touch of passion. He was injured and bedridden for several years. Such humiliation was hard to swallow. But for the Wang family, he still endured it. Now that Zhao Zi said such words, he was very excited. Father, just say it. I believe Mr. Nye will seek justice for us, Wang Fulin nodded and said. Although he didn't know who Nye Tian was, Wang Fulin could feel a strong confidence from him. Hence, he chose to believe in Nye Tian. All right. Wang Qianyuan let out a long breath. His eyes shone with brilliance. He finally told his father what happened in the past. When he brought his daughter, Wang Haolin, to the Red Moon Divine Palace for treatment, the Pill Hall's elder refused to treat Wang Haolin. However, he asked him to leave 100 silkworm crystals behind. He couldn't take it anymore and argued with the people from the Pill Hall. In the end, he was heavily injured by them. After returning to the brilliant Sky City, he was bedridden. What a Pill Hall's elder! After listening to Wang Qianyuan's words, Nye Tian let out a low roar. His eyes were cold and stern. He was suppressing a huge anger in his heart. The Red Moon Divine Palace's elder did such a thing. What's the difference between him and a bandit? Jiu Qianxing was even more furious. He cursed, Is the Red Moon Divine Palace a bandit's nest? Zhao Zi's face was extremely embarrassed. He didn't expect such a thing to happen. A dignified Pill Hall's elder actually became a bandit for 100 silkworm crystals. It was really despicable. Lord Zhao, what do you have to say for yourself? Nye Tian's eyes were like torches. He stared at Zhao Zi and asked in a cold tone. Mr. Nye Tian, don't worry. I will definitely report this matter to the Palace Lord. If everything is true, I believe the Palace Lord will punish the Pill Hall's elder severely. Zhao Zi immediately expressed his stance. He was very decisive. City Lord Wang, do you know the name of the elder? Nye Tian's eyes turned dark. He looked at Wang Qianyuan and couldn't help but ask. I don't know. Wang Qianyuan shook his head and said, I only heard the people from the Red Moon Divine Palace addressing the elder as Elder Wei. Elder Wei? When Nye Tian heard the name, he immediately thought of a person. Wei Sun. Wei Jinren. At this moment, Zhao Zi's eyes flashed and he said a name. The Red Moon Divine Palace's Pill Hall had 8 outer sect elders and 1 inner sect elder. But there was only one elder Wei, and that was Wei Jinren. Moreover, Wei Jinren was the inner sect elder of the Pill Hall. He also had a son, which was Wei. Senator Wei Jinren was extremely overbearing in the Red Moon Divine Palace. No one expected him to do such a thing. At this moment, Zhao Zi's expression turned even uglier. At the same time, he was a little worried. He knew that Wei Jinren had a huge influence in the Red Moon Divine Palace. If he were to touch this person, he might cause a huge commotion in the Red Moon Divine Palace. The Red Moon Divine Palace was already in troubled times. If they were to touch an inner sect elder now, it would be like adding snow to snow. Nie Tian took a look at Zhao Zi and asked with a low voice, "Lord Zhao, is this elder Wei related to Wei Sen?" "He is Wei Sen's father." Zhao Zi's eyes turned serious and said solemnly. Nie Tian laughed and didn't look at Zhao Zi anymore. Instead, he said to Wang Qianyuan, "City Lord Wang, don't worry. Since Lord Zhao knows about this, he will definitely report this to the Red Moon Palace Lord. He will definitely give you justice." It was obvious that he wasn't saying this to Wang Qianyuan, but to Zhao Zi. "Thank you, Lord Zhao, for helping me." Wang Qianyuan wasn't stupid. He nodded slightly and bowed to Zhao Zi. Chapter 1386. In the main hall, Nie Tian looked at Zhao Zi and said, "Lord Zhao, I think the palace lord will handle this matter impartially and won't disappoint me." Of course. Zhao Zi smiled awkwardly. The cold sweat on his forehead flowed down to his cheek. On one side was Nie Tian, and on the other side was an inner sect elder. This really put Zhao Zi in a difficult position. He could only report this matter to the palace lord and see how the latter would deal with it. "City Lord Wang, what kind of strange illness does your daughter have? I want to take a look. Is it convenient?" At this moment, Nie Tian looked at Wang Qianyuan and suddenly asked. Nie Tian was very curious. What kind of illness did Miss Wang have that even the Red Moon Divine Palace's Pill Hall elder wasn't willing to treat? If it was a normal illness, Wei Jinren might treat it casually. However, he didn't treat it because Miss Wang's illness was not normal. Wang Qianyuan frowned and seemed to be in a difficult position. It seemed like he didn't want Nie Tian to see his daughter. City Lord Wang, when Nie Tian was in the Heaven World's God Realm, he was a rank 9 alchemist. Although he is a little worse than the alchemists in your territory, he has seen many strange illnesses. He might be able to cure your daughter's illness. Jiu Qianxing laughed and said. Wang Qianyuan was slightly stunned. He looked at Nie Tian suspiciously. He didn't expect Nie Tian to be an alchemist. Even in the realms, there weren't many 9th-grade spirit alchemists at this level. In the territory, the alchemists in the plane world were called alchemists. Above alchemists were divine alchemists. Nie Tian was so young, but he was actually a rank 9 alchemist. This really surprised Wang Qianyuan. "Father, let Mr. Nie take a look." At this moment, Wang Fulin also said. "All right." Wang Qianyuan frowned and finally nodded in agreement. He said, "Mr. Nie, please follow me." Nie Tian followed Wang Qianyuan and left. The others waited in the main hall. After a short moment, Nie Tian arrived at a remote small courtyard. The surroundings were actually desolate, and it revealed a desolate aura. He frowned and wondered why Wang Qianyuan would let his daughter live in such a place. "Mr. Nie, my daughter is in the room. She's not in a good mood, please forgive her." Wang Qianyuan pointed to a room in the courtyard and shouted, "Hao Lin, I'm your father. I've brought an alchemist to treat you." "No!" A sharp roar suddenly came from the room. "I don't want to see anyone. Let them go." Wang Qianyuan looked at Nie Tian helplessly, his heart aching. Nie Tian looked even more puzzled. What kind of illness did Wang Haolin have? Why did she not want to see people? He thought for a moment and immediately strode forward to the door and lightly said, "Miss Wang, I'm an alchemist. I'm here to treat your illness. I'm coming in now. Don't come in. A shrill roar came from the room once again, and then a cloud of black mist spread out, directly enveloping Nyetian. Huh! Nyetian frowned. He sensed a very violent aura from this mist. It seemed to be a very strange power, with a sense of desolation. It was somewhat similar to the desolation forbidden power in the forbidden ice and snow stone that imprisoned Rui Qianyu. Nyetian's body shook, dispelled the mist, and then directly pushed the door open and stepped in. Don't come in. Get out, get out. In the room, a girl covered her face and shouted in panic, as if she was about to cry. Miss Wang, don't be nervous. I'm not a bad person. Nyetian said softly. He used his divine sense to probe, but his whole body frowned, and his face was not small. Although Wang Haolin covered her face, Nyetian still saw her face clearly. Nyetian sensed that Wang Haolin was about 15 or 16 years old, but her appearance was very old. Her face was full of wrinkles, and her skin was also dry and shriveled. She didn't look like a 15 or 16 years old girl at all, but like an old man who was approaching the end of his life. Nyetian was stunned on the spot. He opened his mouth wide, but couldn't say a word. He had seen many strange diseases, but it was absolutely the first time that he had seen a case like Wang Haolin's age and the appearance of an old man. Nyetian also knew a lot about all kinds of strange diseases in his previous life, but he had never seen a description of the situation in front of him. Get out, get out. I don't want you to see me like this. Wang Haolin shouted loudly, looking very irritable. Miss Wang, I'm sorry. I'll go out right now. Nyetian reacted, took 2 steps back, left the room, and closed the door. At this time, he finally understood why Wang Qianyuan was unwilling to let him see Wang Haolin. Wang Haolin was just a teenage girl. Letting others see her old appearance was really a big blow. Mr. Nye, I'm really sorry. Did my daughter scare you? Wang Qianyuan felt very guilty and said to Nyetian. Nyetian shook his head slightly. His heart was thinking about Wang Haolin's symptoms, but no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't think of anything. Wang Haolin's disease was too strange, and it made him feel very troubled. Nyetian. At this time, a voice suddenly sounded in Nyetian's mind. Sakura. Sakura, do you know what disease this is? Nyetian was suddenly stunned. Only now did he remember that there was an old monster who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years by his side. Disease? Sakura laughed strangely and said, Kid, you really know how to joke. If the desolate body is a disease, then this seat also wants to get sick. Desolate body? Nyetian was stunned and immediately understood that Wang Haolin was not suffering from a strange disease, but a kind of spirit body of heaven and earth. In fact, he also thought about the spirit body of heaven and earth just now, but he didn't think of it. The desolate body is one of the 4 ancient taboo bodies. Although it is a little weaker than the sage body, it is not weak by much. Sakura laughed and said, This little girl was just born at the wrong time. If she was born hundreds of thousands of years ago, she would definitely be fought by those old monsters to be accepted as a disciple. Unfortunately, it is not so easy now. What do you mean? Nyetian frowned and looked puzzled. The desolate body is a taboo body. The body will constantly produce the power of desolation and can devour all kinds of vitality. Sakura sighed and said, This little girl looks like an old person at the age of 10. Her vitality has been devoured by the power of desolation. If she hadn't absorbed the power of the silkworm crystal all year round, she would have died long ago. Nyetian was stunned. He had felt a strange power in Wang Haolin's body just now. The power of desolation was very similar to the forbidden power of desolation of the ice and snow stone. They could both devour vitality. However, Nyetian felt that the power of desolation was even more terrifying than the forbidden power of desolation. Sakura, then how do I save her now? Nie Tian became cold and asked solemnly. Save her. Sakura laughed as if he had heard a joke and said, Do you think the body of desolation is a joke? Unless the desolate ancestor is reborn, even the sage can't save her. The power of desolation in her body can no longer be suppressed. Even if she starts to cultivate the 9 heavens desolation art immediately, it will be useless. Just wait for death. Chapter 1387. Mr. Nie, are you okay? In the small courtyard, Wang Qianyuan saw Nie Tian suddenly stunned and couldn't help but ask with a puzzled face. I'm fine. Nie Tian reacted and waved his hand, but his face was extremely solemn. Sigh. Wang Qianyuan sighed and said, My daughter's illness is too strange. I have invited countless alchemists, but no one can tell what illness it is. My poor daughter is only 15 years old, but she has become like this. As a father, In the end, Wang Qianyuan's voice was a little choked, and he couldn't go on. Nie Tian heard Wang Qianyuan's words and frowned even more. He didn't expect Wang Haolin's situation to be so troublesome, much more serious than he imagined. Boy, there is a limit to being a good person. You can't handle this matter, so it's better not to interfere. Sakura sighed and said solemnly, Besides, you can't even protect yourself now. Take care of the heart of nothingness in your body first. Don't interfere? Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, and then his face became gloomy and said, Do you want me to watch this little girl die? Wang Haolin was only 15 years old, a fresh life. Nie Tian couldn't bear to let her die like this. He knew that his ability was limited. There were too many poor people in the world, and he really couldn't help them. But since he met the Wang father and daughter, how could he not help them? Nie Tian, you may not know how terrifying the desolate body is. This little girl is only at the origin spirit realm, and she is a newcomer who has just stepped into the martial Tao. But the power of desolation in her body is enough to hurt a true element realm martial artist. This is the strength of several realms. Sakura saw that Nie Tian didn't intend to give up and said, If she is a Sky Emperor realm martial artist, you can't even get within 10 meters of her. Nie Tian was stunned, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He obviously didn't expect the desolate body to be so terrifying. When he entered the door just now, Wang Haolin released some power of desolation, and it was indeed very terrifying. The barren courtyard in front of him must have been affected by the power of desolation. Sakura, I don't want to hear these things now. Since you've lived for so long, you must have a way to save her, right? Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he said impatiently. Nie Tian, do you really want to save them? Shi Tian suddenly let out a strange laugh and said, You have to think about it carefully. You and this little girl just met by chance and have no relationship with each other. The price to save her is huge. Is a stranger worth it? Nie Tian frowned and said solemnly, Whether it's worth it or not, I'll judge for myself. You just need to tell me how to save him. Once again, Sakura laughed and suddenly said, I'm very curious. If I tell you now that only the boundary of the first Devil Fire universe can save this girl, will you give up the boundary of the universe to her? I won't. Nie Tian's gaze tightened as he answered directly. The boundary of the universe was something that Nie Tian wanted to use to save himself. He would not give up the boundary of the universe to others. There was a prerequisite for him to save people, and that was not to hurt himself or the people around him. People were selfish. Nie Tian was not a saint. It was impossible for him to sacrifice himself for others. You're not too stupid. Sakura smiled in relief and said, If you really want to save this girl, you don't need the boundary of the universe, but you need 2 things that are harder to find than the boundary of the universe. What things? Nie Tian suddenly froze and asked in surprise. A person and a scroll of martial art. Sakura replied solemnly. Just say it. Nie Tian didn't have time to play riddles with Sakura and said impatiently. If you want to save her, you have to find a martial artist with the 9-yang body and the art of desolation of the desolate heaven sect, Sakura said solemnly. 9-yang body? Hearing these words, Nye Tian suddenly froze. His eyes flickered because he really knew a person with the 9-yang body, Rui Qianyu. Rui Qianyu's brother, Rui Qianyu, had the 9-yang body. Back then, he had used the 9-yang body to help Rui Qianyu absorb the power of the 9-color pupils. However, Nye Tian had always felt that Rui Qianyu was a bit mysterious. Faintly, he felt that the other party was hiding a big secret. Although he knew that Rui Qianyu had the 9-yang body, Nye Tian had already lost contact with him. It would be very difficult to find him again. The 9-yang qi produced by the 9-yang body is the power of extreme yang. It has an innate suppression on the power of desolation. Sakura thought that Nye Tian was confused, so he said, "This girl's power of desolation must be suppressed with the 9-yang qi first. Then, let her cultivate the art of desolation of the 9 heavens. Only then can she slowly control the body of desolation." Nye Tian frowned. He didn't expect the matter to be so complicated. He asked, "What are the art of desolation of the 9 heavens and the desolate heaven sect?" The desolate heaven sect was a top sect in the realm hundreds of thousands of years ago. Its sect leader, the desolate ancestor, was a peak paramount god, an existence close to a saint. Sakura seemed to think of something. His voice became a bit heavy. He said, "The desolate heaven sect flourished hundreds of thousands of years ago. Unfortunately, their art of desolation of the 9 heavens could only be cultivated by those with the body of desolation. But how could there be so many people with the body of desolation in the world?" So the desolate heaven sect quickly declined, and the desolate ancestor also mysteriously disappeared. "You mean to say that only the desolate heaven sect had the art of desolation of the 9 heavens, and that the sect no longer has it?" Nye Tian frowned, his face full of helplessness. "Maybe there is." Sakura laughed and said, "Even if the desolate heaven sect is still there, it must be a third-rate sect now. And it may not be in the god-shaking territory. It is almost impossible for you to find it." This. Nye Tian's face was full of black lines. Sakura's words were as if he didn't say anything. "Nye Tian, if you want to save this girl's life, you must let her constantly absorb things like the silkworm crystals. Otherwise, she won't live for long." Sakura sighed, and then his figure disappeared. Nye Tian was stunned, not knowing what to do for a moment. "Mr. Nye, is my daughter's illness very troublesome?" Wang Qianyuan saw Nye Tian's expression change again and again. He had already guessed something in his heart and said with a serious expression. Nye Tian nodded slightly and didn't explain too much. Instead, he said, "Let's go back to the hall first." After returning to the hall of the city lord's residence, Nye Tian asked around and found out that the 3 silkworm crystals could only extend Wang Haolin's life for 3 months. After 3 months, if there were no silkworm crystals, Wang Haolin's life would be in danger. Wang Haolin's situation is a bit tricky. I can only let her use the silkworm crystals to extend her life for now. When I return to the Red Moon Divine Palace, I will ask the Palace Lord of the Red Moon Palace to see if there is any news about the desolate heaven sect. Nye Tian sighed in his heart and could only make this decision for now. Next, Nye Tian and the others didn't waste any more time. They immediately left the brilliant Sky City and headed towards the Red Moon Divine Palace. Wang Qianyuan, Wang Fulin, Wang Haolin, and the others also went together. Chapter 1388. This is the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. After a while, Zhao Zi pointed at a mountain gate far away and said excitedly, no matter what, he had brought Nye Tian and the others to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace safely. He had completed the task given to him by the Crimson Moon Peak. "Mr. Zhao, can I pay a visit to the Crimson Moon Palace Master first?" Nye Tian smiled faintly. He couldn't wait to see how powerful the top-notch experts were. "Of course." Zhao Zi nodded with a smile and said, "The palace master has instructed me to inform Mr. Nie Tian as soon as he arrives." Zhao Zi thought that Nie Tian was worried about the life and death battle with Shui Wushuang, so he said, "Mr. Nie Tian, don't worry. Shui Wushuang is currently cultivating in seclusion. He will only come out when the grand competition of the 12 Shrine begins. The palace master has already told him that everything will be settled after the grand competition of the 12 Shrine." "Thank you." Nie Tian nodded with a smile and said, "Let's go in." Everyone moved and stepped into the mountain gate. Under Zhao Zi's lead, Nie Tian and the others walked towards the Crimson Moon Palace Hall. Nie Tian looked at the magnificent buildings around him and was amazed at the depth of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. "Mr. Zhao." Just as Nie Tian and the others passed by a relatively small hall, a playful voice was heard. Then a figure appeared. It was a middle-aged man in gray. As the man spoke, he arrived in front of Nie Tian and the others. "Elder Wei." Zhao Zi's expression changed when he saw the man's face. He cursed in his heart. "Why did I bump into this guy? Elder Wei?" Nie Tian frowned when he heard Zhao Zi's greeting. His expression sank. "Is this the Pill Hall's Elder Wei Jinren who injured Wang Qianyuan?" "It's him." Almost at the same time, Wang Qianyuan's face changed, and he screamed. His face showed great fear. "It's really him." Seeing Wang Qianyuan's reaction, Nie Tian's heart sank. He immediately understood that the person in front of him was Wei Jinren. He hadn't expected to run into this fellow before he even saw the Crimson Moon Palace Master. At this time, Wei Jinren's pair of sharp eyes sized up Wang Qianyuan. It seemed that after thinking for a long time, he finally remembered who the person in front of him was. He couldn't help but frown and said coldly, "City Lord Wang, why are you here?" Wang Qianyuan was carried by 2 guards of the Wang family. His expression became extremely frightened, and he couldn't say a word. Nie Tian didn't say anything and looked at Zhao Zi instead. The latter understood what he meant and his expression turned extremely ugly. He had no choice but to step forward and say, "Elder Wei, there might be some misunderstanding regarding City Lord Wang's visit to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace a few years ago. I have to explain it to the Palace Lord in person." Wei Jinren frowned and his face darkened. Although Zhao Zi's words were very euphemistic, how could he not understand the meaning behind her words? She was obviously taking Wang Qianyuan to complain to the Palace Lord. "Misunderstanding?" Wei Jinren immediately sneered and said, "This person came to the Crimson Moon Divine Palace to seek medical treatment, but the girl's illness was too strange, and I couldn't cure her. This person couldn't seek medical treatment and insulted me, so I taught him a lesson. Is this a misunderstanding?" "Elder Wei, you..." Wang Qianyuan was stunned. He didn't expect Wei Jinren to be so shameless and lie in front of so many people. He had never insulted Wei Jinren, and the latter didn't attack him to teach him a lesson. When Nie Tian heard Wei Jinren's words, his face suddenly became gloomy. He didn't expect Wei Jinren to be so cunning and push the blame away with just a few words. "Elder Wei, this matter is a little complicated. Both of you insist on your own opinions, and it's really difficult to distinguish. I think it's best to let City Lord Wang meet the Palace Lord," Zhao Zi said cautiously with an awkward expression. It was obvious that he was very afraid of Wei Jinren, and his attitude was very respectful. "Sir Zhao, I don't think there's a need to see the Palace Lord." Wei Jinren smiled cold and glanced at Wang Qianyuan. He said, "How can the Palace Lord have so much time to see such an unruly person who came to cause trouble for no reason?" Zhao Zi's face was extremely ugly, and he didn't know how to deal with it. On the surface, Wei Jinren was suggesting, but in reality, he was giving an order. "Elder Wei." At this time, Nie Tian, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. He stared at Wei Jinren and said lightly, I really want to know, with City Lord Wang's status, how dare he insult an inner court elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace? Also, you said that you only taught him a lesson, but City Lord Wang was a God Realm warrior back then. You taught him a lesson and he couldn't get out of bed for several years. Isn't this kind of lesson a bit too ruthless? Wang Qianyuan was only the city lord of a third-rate city in the Crimson Moonland, while Wei Jinren was an inner court elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. With such a difference in status, Wang Qianyuan didn't dare to insult Wei Jinren. Wei Jinren was obviously lying. Wei Jinren was slightly stunned. He suddenly looked at Nye Tian and said cold, "Stinking brat, who do you think you are? This elder and Lord Zhao are talking. Do you think you have the right to interrupt?" Humph, Nye Tianling laughed and said, "I see that you're talking nonsense, so I can't stand it anymore. If you don't want me to talk, then I'll leave the Crimson Moon Divine Palace now and never step foot into the Crimson Cloud Divine Palace again." After saying that, Nye Tian turned around and left. Mr. Nye Tian. This time, Zhao Zi panicked. Of course, he knew what Nye Tian meant. If he let him leave now, then Nye Tian definitely wouldn't have any chance of joining the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Qi Yufeng had instructed Zhao Zi to make Nye Tian join the Crimson Moon Divine Palace no matter what. Lord Zhao, did you not hear? If someone doesn't like to listen to me, then why should I still stay here? Nye Tian's figure paused for a moment and said cold. Misunderstanding, it's all a misunderstanding. Elder Wei didn't mean it like that. Zhao Zi's face was covered in cold sweat. He looked at Wei Jinren and said quickly, Elder Wei, this is Mr. Nye Tian, an honored guest personally invited by Lord Palace Master. Lord Palace Master is still waiting for him in the Crimson Moon Great Hall. As Zhao Zi spoke, he took out a token in his hand. It was the Crimson Moon Jade token that Yi Qinghai gave him previously. Seeing the Crimson Moon Jade token, Wei Jinren's expression changed and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. He didn't expect Nye Tian's status to be so high that he could actually request for the Crimson Moon Jade token. One had to know that even an inner court elder like him didn't have a Crimson Moon Jade token. Cough cough. However, Wei Jinren reacted quickly. After coughing twice, he took a step forward and bowed slightly to Nye Tian. He actually laughed and said, Mister, I didn't know that you were Lord Palace Master's honored guest. I was rude just now, please don't take it to heart. Oh. Nye Tian raised his eyebrows and said with a contemptuous smile, Then do I have the right to interrupt now? This. Wei Jinren smiled awkwardly and said, Mr. Nye must be joking. Humph. Nye Tianling laughed and ignored Wei Jinren. He turned to Zhao Zi and said, Lord Zhao, let's go. Don't let the Crimson Moon Palace Master wait too long. Yes. Zhao Zi agreed and wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. Chapter 1389. Huh. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at Wei Jinren coldly. He didn't expect Wei Jinren to be so cunning as to not let Wang Qianyuan and the others leave. Elder Wei, this. Zhao Zi was also in a dilemma as he didn't expect Wei Jinren to do this. Guards. In the next moment, Wei Jinren suddenly shouted, and then more than a dozen martial artists in black appeared around him. Each of them had a fierce aura as they stood behind Wei Jinren. Elder Wei, what are you doing? Seeing this scene, Zhao Zi couldn't help but be stunned for a moment and shouted with a frown. Lord Zhao, since Mr. Nye is a distinguished guest personally invited by the Palace Lord, of course this elder has to protect his safety. Wei Jinren smiled sinisterly, then looked at the martial artists behind him and said, The few of you are responsible for Mr. Nye's safety and send him safely to the Crimson Moon Hall. The rest of you, drive Wang Qianyuan and the others out of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. It is an insult to the Divine Palace for such unruly people. Yes. The dozen martial artists in black answered in unison, and then 7 or 8 people walked over and actually surrounded Nye Tian and the others. The other martial artists walked step by step towards Wang Qianyuan and the others. Nie Tian's pupil shrank slightly, then he reacted and was secretly surprised. This Wei Jinren was really a ruthless character and very shrewd. At this time, Wei Jinren obviously wanted to kill them to silence them, to act first and report later. Anyway, Wang Qianyuan and the others were of low status, so it didn't matter even if they died. As long as Wang Qianyuan died, there would be no evidence of the robbery. At that time, even if Nie Tian told the Crimson Moon Palace Lord about the matter, the Crimson Moon Palace Lord wouldn't be able to do anything to Wei Jinren without evidence, and the people around Nie Tian who were protecting him were clearly telling them not to act rashly. At this time, Wang Qianyuan also realized what was going on. His face was full of horror, and his face became as pale as paper. Zhao Zi was stunned on the spot. He didn't expect Wei Jinren to be so bold as to kill them in front of him. What a good Wei Jinren! His methods are indeed ruthless. Nie Tian cursed in his heart. After that, he took a step forward as his aura soared. Is this how the people of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace treat their esteemed guests? As the high-pitched voice fell, Nie Tian's figure moved and directly appeared in front of Wang Qianyuan. He said coldly, "Who dares to touch him?" The guards were stunned. They did not expect that Nie Tian would dare to make a move. The guards froze on the spot, not daring to step forward. Although they could sense that Nie Tian only had the strength of a heavenly emperor, they had also heard Zhao Zi's words earlier. They knew that Nie Tian's identity was extraordinary, so how would they dare to make a move? Humph! Wei Jinren looked at Nie Tian and was stunned at first. Then, he sneered and said, "Mr. Nie, this is the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Even if you are the honored guest of the palace mistress, you can't behave atrociously here. You'd better behave yourself for this elder." As his cold voice fell, Wei Jinren's body suddenly released a huge aura. Instantly, the god's domain bloomed and turned into a huge pressure, shrouding towards Nie Tian. "Elder Wei, what are you doing?" Zhao Zi was stunned and immediately reacted. He screamed and his expression changed. He never expected that Wei Jinren would dare to make a move on Nie Tian. Wei Jinren was an inner court elder of the Divine Palace. However, he was from the Pill Hall and was most proficient in alchemy. Hence, his strength was slightly weaker than the ordinary inner court elders, only at the peak of the middle deity realm. Even so, such a pressure was definitely not something a heavenly emperor realm martial artist could withstand. "Lord Zhao, don't be nervous. I just don't want Mr. Nie to meddle in other people's business." Wei Jinren smiled playfully. He released all his aura onto Nie Tian. He wanted to use his aura to suppress and trap Nie Tian. Under the pressure of Wei Jinren's aura, Nie Tian felt a huge force pressing on his body. It made him feel suffocated, and his whole body felt a tearing pain. "Mr. Nie, I advise you not to resist. The more you resist, the more pain you will suffer." Wei Jinren smiled coldly and said to the martial artists in black, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take action. Throw Wang Qianyuan out." "Yes." The martial artists reacted and nodded their heads. Then, they walked towards Wang Qianyuan and the others. They definitely wouldn't dare to kill anyone here. However, once they left the Red Moon Divine Palace, Wang Qianyuan and the others would definitely die. "Mr. Nie." Wang Qianyuan and the others were chased away. They looked at Nie Tian in fear. "Bastard!" At this time, Nie Tian suddenly let out an angry roar, and the aura around his body was suddenly released. A violent and domineering sword aura soared into the sky, and a loud explosion sounded in the air. Wei Jinren's aura was actually forcibly broken. Nie Tian's figure flickered and appeared next to Wang Qianyuan. He stared at the martial artists in black and said coldly, "If you dare to take another step forward, I won't be polite." These martial artists in black were early-stage low-god realm. If it was a real battle, Nie Tian wouldn't be afraid of them. At this time, Nietchio and the others also came to Nietion's side. Emorushi and Shue stood off to the side. After the previous incident, Nietion repeatedly told Emorushi to keep an eye on Shue and not let her fight again. Wei Jinren was suddenly stunned, and his expression was astonished to the extreme. He simply didn't dare believe that a heavenly Emperor realm martial artist had actually broken through his oppressive aura. It was truly too bizarre. Zhao Zi was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that things would turn out this way. Nietion looked back at Wang Qianyuan and the others and said, "City Lord Wang, don't worry. Since I brought you here, I will protect you. What are you standing there for? Attack!" Wei Jinren came to his senses. He strode forward and bellowed. Bang! However, just as his voice faded, a muffled sound was heard. A martial artist in black was sent flying. His body smashed on the ground, leaving a trail of blood. Nietion raised the heaven-severing sword and said in a cold voice, "Who dares to step forward? This is an example." Those martial artists in black were shocked. They didn't expect that Nietion would suddenly attack. They also didn't expect that Nietion's strength would be so strange. Seriously injuring a low-god realm expert with one sword strike. Was he really a heavenly emperor? Oh no. When Zhao Zi saw this scene, her face suddenly changed and she cried out in her heart. It was a great taboo for Nietion to injure a disciple of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Presumptuous! Wei Jinren bellowed. The corner of his mouth curled into a cold smile. He shouted, "Brat, even if you are invited by the palace lord, you shouldn't injure people in the Divine Palace. You're courting death." As Cold roared, Wei Jinren raised his palm. A vortex appeared. An enormous aura was released, and a mysterious power surged in the air. Chapter 1390. When Wei Jinren saw Nietion injuring a member of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, his eyes turned cold, and he did not hesitate to kill him. Even if Nietion was someone invited by the Crimson Moon Palace Master, he had already violated the Divine Palace's great taboo by injuring a member of the Divine Palace in the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Even if Wei Jinren were to kill him, he would have a legitimate reason to do so. Boom! In the void, the crystal-clear claws shone brightly and pressed down on Nietion. Huh! Nietion felt a vast and endless power rushing towards him. The overwhelming momentum made him frown, and he suddenly felt a sense of suffocation. After all, Wei Jinren was an expert at the peak of the Middle God Realm, and his strength was almost 2 realms higher than Nietion. This was a huge gap that no talent or martial arts technique could make up for. "Brat, go to hell!" Wei Jinren's face showed a cold smile, and he said viciously in his heart. He seemed to have seen the tragic scene of Nietion being killed by his palm. Nietion! Upon seeing this scene, Emorushi let out a cry of alarm, her delicate face flushed with nervousness. Cher's beautiful eyes flickered, but she seemed to feel something and did not make a move. Heaven and earth craftiness Tao, 2 craftiness fusion. In the face of danger, Nietion suddenly let out a low roar. Then, 2 vortexes emerged from his palms and turned into 2 huge black serpents. They suddenly shot out and merged into one in the air. Their huge bodies were surging with scorching black flames of nothingness. At this critical moment, Nietion finally combined the 2 strongest moves of the Starry Sky ancient martial technique into one. The moment the terrifying giant black snake rushed out, the void shook. Boom! The next moment, the giant black snake and the crystal-clear claws collided, and after a loud noise, the giant black snake directly collapsed. The absolute gap in strength caused Nietion's ultimate move to be directly defeated. However, the giant black serpent managed to block the crystalline claws for a moment, giving Nietion an instant of time. At the same time, the meteor wings appeared behind Nietion, and he quickly retreated. Boom! The crystal-clear claws slammed down, lifting up the ground. A huge crack that was hundreds of meters long appeared. It was extremely terrifying. The ground of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace was protected by a spirit array. The power of Wei Jinren's palm was truly terrifying. Nie Tian's figure leapt into the air, and when he saw the scene beneath his feet, he was slightly shocked. Fortunately, he had dodged in time, or else he would have died if he had been hit by the crystalline claws. Wei Jinren's palm strike actually missed, causing him to be quite surprised. His expression became extremely strange. Nie Tian's reaction speed had far exceeded his expectations. His all-out palm strike had actually failed to injure Nie Tian. It was simply a great humiliation. When Zhao Zi saw that Nie Tian had miraculously dodged Wei Jinren's palm, she couldn't help but exhale a mouthful of turbid air, but her face was already as pale as paper. Damn it! Wei Jinren roared angrily and stomped on the ground, causing the ground to shatter. His figure shot up into the sky and attacked Nie Tian again. Rumble! This time, Wei Jinren did not hold back at all. Both of his palms struck out, and a sky full of crystalline blades appeared in the air. They were like sharp swords, and they pressed towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. Wei Jinren's power was a little strange. It seemed to be some kind of mutated Earth-type power like a crystal. With such a large-scale attack, even if Nie Tian's reaction speed were fast enough, he would not be able to dodge it. Stop! At the moment of life and death, a deep roar rang out, and then a figure in gray appeared in the sky. As soon as that person appeared, he blasted out a punch without any fancy moves. A huge fist shadow appeared, and like a gale sweeping away the fallen leaves, it directly shattered the crystalline blades that filled the sky. Bang! Immediately after, a muffled sound rang out, and Wei Jinren's figure was directly sent flying. When his figure stabilized, he immediately spurted out a mouthful of blood. Song Yu! Wei Jinren suddenly raised his head, and when he saw the figure in gray that suddenly appeared, he exclaimed in surprise. It's Elder Tsang! As soon as Zhao Zi saw the figure in the sky, her eyes flashed and her face was full of joy. The person who saved Nie Tian at the critical moment was none other than the chief elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's Stargazing Hall, Song Yu. Back then, it was also Song Yu who found out that Cher and the others had become gods from the Stargazing Great Array. Nie Tian looked at Song Yu and let out a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, the latter appeared in time, or else he would have been in danger this time. Elder Tsang, what is the meaning of this? Wei Jinren looked at Song Yu who suddenly appeared, and frowned. He was actually the first to become angry. Elder Wei, Mr. Nye is an honored guest personally invited by the Palace Lord, yet you actually attacked him. Are you not putting the Palace Lord in your eyes? Song Yu responded coldly. Wei Jinren frowned and said, This person injured my Crimson Moon Divine Palace's people and looked down on the Divine Palace. As an inner court elder of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace, shouldn't I teach him a lesson? Song Yu sneered and said, You clearly want his life. Is this also a lesson? He injured the Divine Palace's people, so why can't I kill him? Wei Jinren no longer concealed himself, and instead assumed a righteous posture, as if he was defending the dignity of the Crimson Moon Divine Palace. Wei Jinren, put away your fake attitude. This elder has no time to watch you act. Song Yu smiled coldly, and no longer said anything to Wei Jinren. He turned to Nie Tian and said, Mr. Nye, I'm really sorry that such a thing happened. Please come with me. My friend also wants to come with us. Nie Tian nodded slightly, and said indifferently, Of course. Song Yu nodded indifferently, and directly said to Zhao Zi, Lord Zhao, bring Mr. Nye's friend to the Stargazing Hall. Yes. Zhao Zi agreed, and then said to Imo Rushi and the others, Everyone, please come with me. Everyone left directly, and the black-clothed martial artists naturally did not dare to make a move. They could only stare at each other. Wei Jinren was afraid of Song Yu, and did not dare to make a move, but his two sharp eyes kept flickering, obviously thinking about something. Nie Tianling glanced coldly at Wei Jinren, and then left with Song Yu. Song Yu. Wei Jinren looked at the backs of Nie Tian and the others as they left, and he almost squeezed out a name from between his teeth. He and Song Yu were originally not on good terms, and now that the latter had ruined his plans, it made him want to kill him even more. Let's go find Brother Long Wei first. Wei Jinren knew that Wang Qinyuan's matter could no longer be protected, so he said in his heart and directly left. He wanted to find the Crimson Moon Divine Palace's deputy palace master, Long Wei, who was his sworn brother. In recent years, Long Wei's reputation had been very high, and there was a faint trend of it overshadowing Crimson Moon Peak. There were even rumors in the Divine Palace that Long Wei was going to seize power. Wei Jinren was a staunch supporter of Long Wei, and if the latter became the palace master, then he would become the deputy palace master. Nie Tian soon arrived at the Crimson Moon Great Hall under Song Yu's lead, while Mo Rushi and the others went to the Stargazing Hall. Nie Tian believed that Mo Rushi and the others should be safe in the Stargazing Hall. No matter how arrogant Wei Jinren was, it was impossible for him to kill people in the Stargazing Hall. As soon as he walked into the hall, Nie Tian sensed a profound aura, which made him feel relaxed and relaxed. Not long after, he came to the center of the hall and saw a burly figure standing there, with a majestic aura, as if it was not a person standing there, but a mountain standing there.